Hey guys, welcome out to Revolution this morning. We're going to be looking at the 7 problems, pre-trib problems and the Prewrath Rapture. So we're at the section where it is the 2nd Thessalonians problem. Now I'm just going to, I forgot to present my screen here, so I'll just share the screen. Here we go. Okay, so now this is something that over the last 6 months I've been investigating quite thoroughly, and I've put a lot of information onto my Textus Receptus website, and so I think you'll find this interesting and enlightening. Most people, what I find is they simply only just parrot what other people are saying. When it comes to these type of issues, many people don't want to really go and study these things to the nth degree. They just want to side with a guru. And this is unfortunate because you'll just get people say, oh, well, I just follow Alan Kirshner, or Stephen Edison said this, or Tommy McMurtry, he said this. And, and so you rarely get people questioning everything. See, when I'm confronted with something and there is some sort of study that has to be done, I go straight to the original source documents and I start from there, and I question the first things that I see. So you'll look at an original source document and you'll examine how things are translated. Like, say, I'll show you through this that the Septuagint that they claim doesn't use the word apostasia in a spatial way clearly does, and that it's been wrongly cited that it doesn't. We're going to look at certain other things in the Koine Greek era that actually apocryphal works that talk about apostasia as a rapture, as not only just as a departure or spatial departure, but as people being raptured. And so these guys are like, oh, there's no literature whatsoever anywhere that ever says this. And so this is the type of thing which I've set up the Textus Receptus Academy for, so that people can watch how, say, someone like myself or Stephen Avery or there are many other people, Christopher Yetzer, even Bryan Ross, he does a very good job at doing this. How someone pulls apart a well-constructed argument and just goes through the bits and sort of not pulls it to pieces, but goes through and just double checks everything. And what I've found is most people don't do that. They just look at someone else's argument, and most of the time they're not really thinking for themselves. They're being guided by someone, and most of the time they've got a presupposition toward their position. Now, when I was told that I was going to do a debate with Tommy McMurtry, I started going through these videos, and actually it was a debate with Matthew Singleton. And so I was at Sydney at the time, and so we did a debate. It was pretty lousy. It wasn't really a good debate. It just, I feel like he just kept putting the stick in the spokes of the wheel, and just he wasn't allowing for a free-flowing conversation, which made it really lousy. And so, but he showed me, this was the only video that he showed me to promote his position. So I went through it, and when I got to this 2nd Thessalonians problem, up until that point, I was convinced that 2nd Thessalonians, when it's talking about the falling away, it's talking about a falling away from the faith. Okay, I was absolutely convinced with that. I'd looked at that as a new convert, and I thought, well, that's exactly what it's saying. And so I hadn't deviated from that. I'd heard as a new convert that there were people saying that it was a departure as in a rapture. And I just saw straight away immediately like, no, that just seems silly. Okay. So I didn't go with that and just moved on. And most friends that I know who would study things to the nth degree, they are in agreement with that. And so it was only when I was sort of challenged with these videos that they were saying, hey, this is actually a popular view, excuse me, that people are starting to go with. Well, that was their claim, that it's a brand new thing, sort of thing. I thought, well, actually, I'll look into this only just to sort of cover all the grounds. And then I was actually listening to Standing for Truth with Donnie, and he was, I guess it was almost like doing a Stephen Anderson to one of his callers. A guy had rung up, and he used the 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, verse 3 argument that they're falling away there. He was saying that is a departure, it's a rapture. And Donnie was, vomiting all over him and wouldn't let him talk and was asking him 3 questions. And then he'd go to answer one of them. He's like, hey, shut up, I'm talking. And, just being an obnoxious. The more I listened to these videos leading up to the debate, I just thought, now, do I really want to have anything to do with these guys? They're really, really overly obnoxious, like Stephen Anderson style obnoxious. So that's why I've just gone, I'm not going to do any more debates with these guys. Because I don't want to be part of that crew. I don't want to be part of the Andersonite crew. And what's amazing is these guys never mention Anderson, do they? Tommy McMurtry last night, it was doing a live thing. Well, it was last night, my time. It was 3 o'clock in the morning, actually. I woke up and I saw it was playing. And I was like, okay, I'll jump on. And I just asked a few questions. And I said, well, how come you can say that, oh, we're all related to Darby and Clarence Larkin and McDonald and all these other weirdos? Why don't they ever just say, hey, I got my teaching from a pastor called Stephen Anderson? You know what I mean? Why don't they come out and just say it? Because most of them were saying that like 2 or 3 years ago when they were with him. Now they're just like, oh, no, it's the historical position and all this sort of stuff. No, the Prewrath position is actually brand new. And we can easily prove this. One of the books, the earliest book written on it was in the 1990s. And this was on the very cover, they actually say that it is a new position. And so it's a new position on the Rapture. So when you're listening to Alan Kirshner, when you're listening to Stephen Anderson, Tommy McMurtry, all these new IFB guys, their position's only been around since 1990. So it's just over 30 years old. And so, why aren't they going through the history of that? But they're like, oh, no, we just got it from the Bible. And so they will pull us over the coals and say, oh, you got it from Clarence Larkin. You got it from, and I'm like, no, I just read the Bible and got it. But these guys obviously got it from Anderson. How can you even come to the same conclusions as Anderson, without being part of his crew? You know what I mean? Sure, maybe you might just have a different opinion. You might become mid-trib or whatever. You might be influenced by someone else. But these guys were like, you listen to their sermons and it's like, yes, then in the book of Revelation, this happens next. And you listen to Anderson, this happens next. You listen to Standing for Truth, Donnie, and he's like, yep, he just repeats Anderson stuff. Is it Rapture 1.5? Is it, all these same things that Anderson said. So these guys are all fully, absolutely saturated with Anderson's teachings to the eyeballs, but they never mention the guy. It's quite amazing. And so, but they're very quick to project that type of insecurity onto us and say, oh, Clarence Larkin, oh, Darby, and all this other stuff, as if, I've never been worried about that sort of stuff. I just go, well, okay, well, perhaps they saw what I saw, but have it, plenty of people have seen what I've seen in certain doctrines and certain scriptures. I've done full studies into things, gone all the way through it. And some people that I really don't like as preachers believe exactly the same thing. And I'm like, oh, do I really want to go there? It's like, well, I have to follow truth wherever it leads me, no matter who believes it. And so anyway, we'll get straight into this because I do have a propensity to just waffle on for like 40 minutes. So let's get into the 2 Thessalonians problem.
Now concerning the coming of our Lord Jesus Christ, and our being gathered together to him, we ask you, brothers, not to be quickly shaken in mind or alarmed, either by a spirit or a spoken word, or a letter seeming to be from us, to the effect that the day of the Lord has come. Let no one deceive you in any way, for that day will not come unless the rebellion comes first, and the man of lawlessness is revealed, the son of destruction, who opposes and exalts himself against every so-called God or object of worship, so that he takes his seat in the temple of God, proclaiming himself to be God.
Yeah, I just want to point out a few things here. According to them, now concerning the coming of our Lord Jesus Christ and our being gathered together to him, we ask you, brothers, not to be quick. So I don't know which version this is. Not to be quickly shaken in mind or alarmed, either by a spirit or a spoken word or a letter seeming to be from us, to the effect that the day of the Lord has come. So these guys claim the day of the Lord is the rapture and the second coming all in one shot. Okay. Or actually, sorry, the Andersonites, I should clarify that. So when you're looking at this video with Kirshner, they believe the day of the Lord is sort of like after the 5-year and 1 quarter period. So, but I often hear people say, that one of the best arguments against apostasy being the rapture is, well, it's saying the rapture won't happen until the rapture comes. And it's just really strange. It's bizarre because, clearly here it's saying the day of the Lord. And so the Andersonites will have, the day of the Lord, the rapture, the second coming, all in one thing. So all pancaked up. But these guys believe that it's going to be 5.25 years. That's as far as I'm aware. I'm not trying to misrepresent them or anything. That's sort of what I can remember that they believe. And then the day of the Lord happens. So from then until the second coming. And so, so it says, let no man deceive you in any way, for that day will not come unless the rebellion. So notice they're using the modern versions. And this is one thing that I've noticed that about this verse is that a lot of modern versions, they'll use either the word apostasy, they use the word rebellion, and even people who have the position where they think the apostasy is a departure, they say that the King James made a mistake here by having falling away and all this sort of stuff. So I just want to make it very clear. I think the King James is perfectly accurate here with falling away. I see no problem. And I'm not just saying that because I'm like, I don't want to get in trouble with the King James guys, When we look at the Greek word, which we're going to examine, we're going to look at a few, a bit of the etymology of the word. We're going to examine a few things. You'll clearly see what I'm seeing at the end of this video. So we're going to go through this, and we're going to go through some of Donnie's material as well. So it says here, let no man deceive you anyway, for that day will not come unless the rebellion. So they've changed the context to meaning a rebellion. Okay, so Alan Kirshner is sort of like, well, it's either a rebellion, an uprising, or something that happens in your mind. So they're usually saying it's not a physical, spatial departure. So in other words, like say the word further and farther. Okay, now the word farther, it has the word far in it. So that would be something where you're traveling, So if I said, okay, we went, usually this is an older style word used in the King James translation era, where we would say, Jesus, he walked farther. He went farther with them. But if I said, I'm not going to carry this conversation on any further, the words are related, but there is a distinction there. So further is something that's more philosophical. It's more something that is to do with something that's non-physical. Okay, so that's the argument that they're trying to make, is that apostasia is never something physically departing. Okay, and so I'm going to prove that completely wrong. You'll be able to see straight through this argument, and I'll have you questioning the scholarship of Alan Kirshner. At the end of it, you'll just be like, he's like, a bit like James White. And as I've mentioned so many times before, Alan Kirshner is mentioned in the foreword of the King James Only Controversy as one of two people who specifically helped James White with this book. It says, I'd like to thank two people in particular, and then he mentions Alan Kirshner provided invaluable resources and suggestions from his own knowledge of the textual critical field. So he helped James White write this book. And for anyone who's been following my channel or getting involved with the Textus Receptus issues, you know that how many holes are in that book, how many holes are in the argumentation of the anti-Textus Receptus crowd like James White. And so I find when I listen to Kirshner, I just hear these confident errors. When someone says something very confidently, you usually go, wow, that must be true. He must have studied that. And so we're going to examine. Now, I'm not saying he hasn't studied it, but what he's done is he's done a lot of study, but he hasn't done very in-depth study. So let's continue on.
2 Thessalonians 2, verses 1 to 4.
The most problematic passage for pre-tribulationists is 2 Thessalonians chapter 2.
Why is it the most problematic passage? Now, even before I believed it meant apostasia, if we just go to 2 Thessalonians 2:3, I always just saw it as, okay, let no one deceive you by any means, for that, because I used to add words to this. I used to say, unless they come the great falling away from the faith first. That's how I viewed the word. And so we're going to see here that Alan Kirshner actually commits that fallacy, the D.A. Carson fallacy that he says we're committing. He actually commits that. And I was committing that fallacy too. And so I've moved away from that, and I've realized, hang on, it does just mean simply a departure. So let no one deceive you by any means, for that day shall not come, except there come a falling away first. So I used to think, okay, falling away from the faith, and that man of sin be revealed, the son of perdition. And so I always viewed it as, okay, well, you know, Christianity is going to get weaker and weaker. And that sort of came in with the whole, you know, will Jesus find faith on the earth? And when I was first a Christian, there was a whole bunch of people saying there's going to be an end times revival. Now, a few years after that, there was, I was getting involved with discernment groups, and they're like, no, it's going to be end times falling away. So, okay, which is it? Is it going to be a revival falling away? So I actually formulated my own teaching where there was going to be first a revival, a massive worldwide revival. And because so many people get saved, then there's a huge falling away because of persecution. And so I was like, I had this sort of thing in my mind where, and I guess, you know, having this type of concept that there is going to be a falling away, it's sort of like something that's non-detectable. Because you think in some countries there's like 2% Christians. Let's say in Pakistan, there's 2% Christian there. So what would a falling away look like? Would it get down to 1%? Or, in some other countries, like say here in Australia, there's probably, like I'm talking about genuine Christians. There's not that many genuine, like I'd say less than 1%. But if you had, nearly every church with, LBGT flags on the front and all that, they would see that as an apostasy. But it's really just society changing, because these people aren't born again anyway. They're just sort of fake Christians. They have a fake church. They have fake pastors. 95% of these churches are fake. You know what I mean? The Mormons, the Jehovah's Witnesses, Roman Catholics, all these groups are just, they're a facade. So everyone has a different definition of falling away. I mean, if you have full born again, Bible believing, street preaching, I hate the word soul winning now said by an Andersonite. It's like a poison sort of. It's almost like they have so much pride in this. I do soul winning. It's like, okay, it's just this really weird thing because they have to boast about what they're doing. But I'm talking about full genuine Christians who love God, love others. They want to see people saved. Then they go off and they're at the pub and they're drinking and they're going off and taking drugs like they used to or whatever, and you're like, oh, it's a falling away. The thing is, how do you define this falling away? It's one of those things where it's like people just go, oh, well, it just means that Christianity is going to decline. But see, most people only see Christianity in their little town or in their country. So if you were living in England, you're like, yeah, well, Christianity has declined, If you're living in Scandinavia, if you're living even in some parts of America, it's like, oh, well, it used to be a really Christian place here. Now it's not. But then you go to other countries, like say you go to Indonesia, like the Christian population used to be like 10%, and now it's like, getting up to 20% in a lot of places. I mean, that's a lot of people. They've got 300 million people there. And so in some places it's booming. Christianity is booming. In other places it's dying out. And so many times they're just saying, oh, well, in America, we're having a falling away. Well, why is we don't have to be like Hollywood. Like when the aliens come, they've always got their eyes on America. It's quite hilarious. It's like, oh, well, they're just going to go to Washington, D.C. And, it's this strange sense of, we're the best in the world. Like, I know there is a lot of good things about historical America. At the moment, America, it is just sort of just like any other country. I mean, in Africa, the gospel is booming in Africa. In many, many places. In India, so many Christians. And so that there is revival happening, what we would label, And the thing is, too, a lot of the time it just comes down to these labels. Like I could make a whole thing about revival, and say, oh, well, we're using the word wrong, and this is what seems to be what the Andersonites do. They get a word like tribulation and go, but it's not actually the tribulation, that period in the book of Revelation, that little bit there is not tribulation. And it's like, look, it's just a general term. You know what I mean? It's like when people use the word Textus Receptus. The first time that was coined was in 1633 in the Elzevir's uncle and nephew edition. And they said it was the Textus Receptus, which means it was the text received by all. And so people have retroactively put that onto Stephanus's text and Beza's text. And also now it's pretty much any Greek text of the Reformation is labeled a TR edition because there was no other edition because Vaticanus was just rejected. And so there was no other edition. That's amazing. These guys are worried about, this TR is different to this TR in a few minor places. And they don't even have a text until, 200-300 years later. It's quite amazing to watch. But what people like Mark Ward do is they pit one Textus Receptus against another. And it's quite amazing that they do this. But it's just because they're labeled Textus Receptus. So you say, I follow the Textus Receptus. They're like, oh, okay, let's go back and look at everything that's labeled Textus Receptus and you have to defend it. And it's like, no, I don't. I defend certain editions. And see, what these guys never acknowledge is that people like me are loudly saying that the King James is a type of Textus Receptus. This was said by Edward Hills, and many people believe this, but they don't want to go there because straight away it shuts their argument down, where they just want to have this whole thing where they're pitting TR editions against each other. It's a bit like the term Byzantine text, okay? So you can't really have something labeled the Byzantine text until the Byzantine Empire is there. So people, if you find a papyri and it's got Byzantine readings, you say, oh, this has got a Byzantine reading. They're like, how can it have a Byzantine reading? The Byzantine Empire wasn't even there. So from their definition, they actually change reality. So someone who's just a logical thinker would go, well, obviously we've labeled something Byzantine. It doesn't mean that before that time there can't be any Byzantine readings in anything else. So the papyri is filled with Byzantine readings. You just have to read Harry Stur's work. And this disproved Westcott and Hort's concept that there was no Byzantine readings until basically around the time of Chrysostom. And this got rid of their whole theory of the Lucianic recension and all this. But all I'm trying to say is that people, they get a word and they say it can only fit into this thing. And then you show examples outside of that and they're like, no, you're committing fallacies. And it's like, no, you've just defined something too tightly. You need to loosen up. You need to start thinking and looking at things and examining things from a different perspective. You can't just get a label like the Textus Receptus and go, well, you support the first edition of Erasmus that didn't have the Comma Johanneum in it. It's like, well, why do I have to support that? Oh, because it's called Textus Receptus. It's like, well, I follow the King James. I follow the text of Theodore Beza, the 1598, underlining the King James. It's why do I have to defend something just because it's labeled that? And so anyway, it says, let no man deceive you by any means, for that day shall not come except there come a falling away first, and that man is sin be revealed, the son of perdition. So I used to think this falling away was the falling away from the faith. And I also thought that, the man of sin being revealed, because the falling away had to happen first, then the man of sin is revealed afterwards. Okay, so I always, would put a line there. That's just how I thought about it. And I still do. I can't get around the fact that it doesn't say, except the coming and falling away and the man of sin be revealed first. It doesn't say that. So they come a falling away first and that man of sin be revealed. Okay, so this is something else tagged onto, something that's going to happen primarily. Okay. So they're like, oh, this is one of the main problem passages. Even with the old way that I used to read this, it's not a problem. I would just read and go, okay, so let no one deceive you, for that day shall not come unless, there's going to be a bunch of people leave Christianity. And then the man of sin is going to be revealed after that. So it was never like a difficult passage. And so these guys are like, this is one of the most difficult passages that, pre-trib guys have to deal with. I've never been confronted with this. And like, I remember I was in a debate chat group and I was debating Stephen Anderson. And he pointed out to me that the modern versions had said about, I think it was verse 2, the day of Christ is at hand, or the day of Christ is come. And I think I mentioned something just in passing, well, that day had come. He's like, no, it's at hand. It's a different word. And, he was going on about that. And it was like, and he was making it a big deal. Like, oh, Nick Sayers has made this error, blah, blah, blah. And I guess because I'm known as a TR guy, I'm known for word studies and things like that, he was trying to pull me over the coals for that. But it was just a passing statement. So anyway, let's get back to the video.
2 Thessalonians was written by the Apostle Paul, in part to refute a false teaching circulating at the time that the Thessalonians had missed the rapture and were in the day of the Lord.
Okay, so I'm glad that these guys do say this, because this is something that the Andersonites don't really understand, or they purposely sort of try and make blurry. Now, clearly, the teaching here is that they've missed the rapture and they're in the day of the Lord. And so that's how I would view it too. Now, these guys have the rapture, 5.5 years different to where I would have it, or 5.25 years. But at least they're saying, okay, well, yeah, that they're in the day of the Lord. It just depends where that day of the Lord starts. Where when you're dealing with the Andersonites, they're like, oh, the rapture, the second coming, and the day of the Lord are all in one day. So it makes no sense. Because imagine Paul gets wind of this church, like someone like Timothy. I'm only just sort of making this up, Someone like Timothy just turns up and says, hey, do you realize that church in Thessaloniki, they think they're in They think the day of the Lord has come or is at hand. And Paul's like, oh, no, well, I better write a letter about that. Tell me some more. And someone tells all the information. It's like, well, I'll write a letter and I'll explain it. And so he writes 2 Thessalonians to them, sends it to them. Now, how long do you think that would take? It may be a week, a month, maybe 6 months. And so just say it's 3 months or 2 months or something like that. They think they're in the day of the Lord for 2 months. So doesn't that absolutely destroy the whole Andersonite concept that it's just going to be a one-day of the Lord? You know what I mean? It just doesn't make any sense whatsoever. And I can never figure it out why these guys can't see how strange it is to have this, this church thinking, well, the day of the Lord is at hand. And these guys are like, trying to fight against that, or they're not acknowledging that the main thing here is these guys think that the rapture has happened and they're in the day of the Lord. So even regardless of the apostasy issue, this in itself speaks of a rapture happening, or the day of the Lord at least starting before, that them thinking that the day of the Lord's going to start and then the man of sin is going to be revealed and all that sort of stuff. And so, and it's going to be a certain amount, a period of time. Anyway, so I'm still going through a lot of the Prewrath post-trib material from the Andersonites. And so I'm trying not to cross-pollinate them with the Kirshner stuff, because I have jumped into this and it's a tiny bit different. But I'm glad that these guys sort of have the same, many times they have the same ideas as us pre-trib guys, where they have a 7-year tribulation and all the rest of it. It's just their timing of the rapture's off. So
Paul's message to the Thessalonians was very simple. He told them not to worry. They had not missed the rapture, and were therefore not in the day of the Lord.
And so the way he disabuses the Thessalonians from that notion is he says certain things have to happen first. And those things...
Notice, this is the first thing. Certain things, plural, have to happen first. This is key to their understanding of this verse and key to their whole doctrine here, where they have to have you believing where it says the falling away will happen first. And then the second thing it says is, and that man of sin be revealed. They have to go, oh no, these are two events that are linked. A bit like you got the train and then you've got the carriage sort of thing. They're linked. And the word first goes and applies to both of those.
Were the apostasy and the revelation of the man of lawlessness.
See? So they're instead of looking at the word first here, see, when Paul usually writes a sequence, like say I might get this up. Where are we? 1 Corinthians chapter 12. And I might even go 16:11. Yeah. Okay, 1 Corinthians 12. Okay, and it says, and God hath set some in the church, first apostles, secondarily prophets, thirdly teachers, after that miracles, etc. So notice he's like first, second, third, but here he's just saying first. Now, when he just says first, the proton, when he uses that as a standalone word, what it's saying is this is the first thing, but he's not saying that this is the second thing. What he's saying is that that's the first thing that's going to happen. So it's a bit like me saying, okay, well, before Hitler comes to power, you got to have World War I first. Then you got to have the monetary collapse of the Deutschmark happen in, I think it was 1923. But it's not second, is it? There was a lot of events that happened from the end of World War I to 1923. I could say, oh, then there's got to be the formulation of the Nazi Party or something like that. So it's just, we're talking about future history here. So he's saying, okay, firstly, there's got to be a falling away. And not secondarily, but it is not the primary thing. The falling away is a primary thing. So what these guys do is they conflate these two together and say these things have to happen first. Both these things have to happen first.
That is the Antichrist, what we would call the Antichrist.
There are two main reasons why this is a problem for the pre-tribulationists. The first is that, as we have seen, pre-tribbers maintain that there are no events that must occur before the rapture.
So here we go again. And as I mentioned in my other videos, there's no precursors. Now, I know some people say that and teach that, but in my eschatology and in the circles that I've been raised in, pretty much, well, Matthew chapter 24, verses 3 to 14, where it says, beware that no man deceive you. Many will come in my name, saying, I am Christ, will deceive many. There shall be wars and rumors of wars and famines and pestilence and earthquakes in various places. All these are beginning of sorrows. And then it goes on through to there's persecution. Then it talks about, that there's going to be betrayal and all this sort of stuff. All that is before the rapture. In the timeline that I've always understood, and when I listened to people like Dave Hunt, he sort of understood it that way as well. Because when the Y2K thing happened and all these pre-Wrath guys, when you had people like Texe Marrs, saying this was the beginning of the tribulation period and all this sort of weird stuff. And Dave Hunt was like, no, see that you be not troubled. For all these things must come to pass, but the end is not. And he was like, calm down. He was saying, yeah, it's fine to stock a bit of food and all that sort of stuff. But, Texe Marrs was like, we've got to prep for this. And then when nothing happened, it was like, it was almost like a rapture prediction thing. And so this is one of the guys who is instrumental in influencing Steven Anderson, because he's on the Marching to Zion films. He's and so inadvertently, all these other guys who I'm dealing with, they're just like little guys underneath Anderson, because Anderson will actually study these things out. Half of these other guys just steal Anderson stuff. Really, I mean, even verbatim. I've heard Donnie verbatim just say exactly what I'll listen to Donnie and go, okay. Then I'll listen to an Anderson thing and go, hang on, Donnie just said exactly that, word for even the tone of voice and everything. It's like, surely he just watched that and wrote it down. And I'm sure half of his material in the book that he's written is actually Anderson. And then he's gotten a few other guys here and there. Then he's got Kirshner, and he's just sort of, and I actually said to him, your book's a little bit more understandable than just listening to Anderson or listening to McMurtry. At least because he was trying to explain it a little bit better, where these guys were just like, this is how it's happening, and that's it. Thus saith the Lord, sort of thing, where at least Donnie was sort of trying to go, well, I understand if someone gets into Kirshner, they're not going to understand there, so I have to explain it a little bit more. But yeah, they're saying, we have this huge problem because, again, this straw man argument, the no prophesied events before the rapture. But all those things that are in Matthew, the early parts of Matthew 24, they're things like, wars, rumors of wars, famines, pestilence. I could say that you name a century, I could say that those things are happening in them. So it's an escalation of all those things. Okay, it's not like defining moments where you're like, okay, well, this is happening, that's happening. So in each generation, they're like, I'm sure I could go back, even to when there was false prophets, the Millerites, even Jehovah's Witnesses, Seventh-day Adventists, and predicting the end of the world and all this sort of stuff. You could go back to their era, and their literature was like, there's wars, there's famines, there's rumors of wars. This is what's happening, sort of thing. Because those things are happening in all generations, sort of thing. But it's going to escalate. It's going to get to the point where it does say these are the beginning of sorrow. So I don't think that it is something that we can go, okay, let's grab that and we can relate it to the last 2,000 years. No, I think it's going to be just before the rapture that all that happens. But I think during the last 2,000 years, people have thought they're in those times because they are quite generic things, like have a famine. I mean, you just go, there's a famine happening in India, or there's a famine happening in Africa, or there's famine, they've been happening since day dot. So that's what I'm saying. They're quite generic things. When it says the abomination of desolation, that's like like saying, okay, well, that's New Year's Day sort of thing. It's a calendar date moment where other things are sort of like, there's going to be persecution. Well, first century, second century, a lot of people would have thought, well, I'm in that period, so, and obviously these people in Thessaloniki felt that they were in that type of period.
And here Paul blatantly says there are two events that must occur first: the rebellion, sometimes translated as apostasy, and the revealing of the man of lawlessness.
Okay, so it doesn't say that if these two things were going to come first, Paul would have said, for that day will not come unless the rebellion comes, and that, or it would say, for that day will not come until firstly the rebellion come and the man of lawlessness be revealed. But it's very clear that this construction here is saying that this has to happen first, and this is not secondary in a chronological sequence, but it's secondary. It is secondary in a chronological sequence, but secondary in a sense of importance. So this is the main thing that's going to happen, and then afterwards this is going to happen. And when I say it's not going to happen in a chronological sequence, I mean, like I was saying, you have point 1, point 2, point 3. This is going to happen. The first thing that's going to happen is the falling away, and then afterwards, at an undesignated period of time. Now we know it's 3.5 years after that, but it's just mentioned in this verse. It doesn't say 3.5 years. It doesn't say any timeline. It just says it's talking about something that's happening after that, because we know that the falling away is the first thing.
If Paul had taught pre-tribulationism, his simplest answer would be, no, the rapture hasn't occurred yet.
And pretty much it's exactly what he says. Now, I'm going to show you how we look at this verse and how I came to the position that I hold today, and that I'm going to defend. And I have no reason to defend this verse other than that's what I see in it. A lot of these people, what they do, listening to Donnie, listening to Tommy McMurtry and these guys, they tend to make out that people who are pre-trib know that they're wrong, know that they have no argumentation, and are just desperately just trying to find anything. And they've sort of found it and gone, I'm gonna keep that, sort of thing, no matter how stupid it makes them look, sort of thing. And they say this quite often. It's really quite passive aggressive. I mean, Donnie is just openly aggressive. He's just, vomits all over you, sort of thing. Tommy McMurtry is the same, but these guys are more like, oh, these guys have a problem here, and why don't they just read the Bible for themselves and all this sort of stuff? And it's like, well, I've looked at these. I've looked at their arguments. I've read through Kirshner's material and found tons of holes in it that I'm going to mention soon.
Instead of, no, there are certain things that have to happen first.
Now, notice this version here has falling away comes first. So I guess that would be like the New King James or something like that. Let no one deceive you by any means, for that day will not come. It has the day of Christ. So that would be the New King James, because their version has the day of the Lord. Now, some people split hairs over that. I think the day of Christ and the day of the Lord, it's pretty much saying the same thing. And so it is a variant. It is an important thing. I think it should read day of Christ. But when it does say the day of the Lord, I'm just like, well, it's talking about the Lord Jesus Christ. And so I think modern Bibles should change that. But I don't think it affects doctrine as much as some people say that it does. And I'm not just saying that, like, I could go through and say, oh, well, the day of Christ, well, it actually means it's talking about, the rapture happening. But I could make some sort of story up about that. I'm just being as honest as I possibly can with this and say, as though the day of Christ had come or the day of the Lord had come. Now, there is that significance of the day of the Lord, because then straight away it's related to the day of the Lord. But the day of Christ, sometimes it actually says the day of our Lord Jesus Christ. And so I don't separate those two. I think it's just the same the same sort of terminology, but some people have just put Lord there for some reason.
As soon as you say there are certain things that have to happen first, you've undermined pre-tribulationism. So
that's just not true. There are so many people who go, okay, let's look at the signs of the times. Even a lot of discernment ministries will call their ministry or have underneath their banner, you know, we're looking for the signs of the times and relate themselves. I think it's like the sons of Issachar or something. We look at the signs of the times and we evaluate them, and we know, you know, because Jesus said, look at the seasons and all that. But these guys are constantly bringing up the straw man. Oh no, they if they've got this precursor, it just destroys their whole thing. So it's just like this one flimsy little card. If you have any type of precursor before the rapture, I see it does, their whole thing falls down. And it's like, man, it's sure there might be some pre-trib guys out there. It's the most popular position, just like there's some weirdo Trinitarian people out there who express Trinitarianism in a way that I wouldn't, in a way that most people wouldn't. And so do you just get their argument and say, well, you know, these Trinitarians, they say that God is like water, like ice, and like gas, you know, 3 in 1, you know, sort of thing. And it's like, well, that's probably more so modalism. Just because a lot of Trinitarians will explain something wrong, it doesn't mean that those thinking theologians and those Trinitarians who actually formulate their own teaching on this from Scripture are wrong, you know. So
pre-tribulationists have a very difficult time, in my opinion, making 2 Thessalonians 2 fit with their thinking.
Okay, so let's just wind that back.
Making 2 Thessalonians.
I don't know. He just said that they have a problem and shake his head a bit, I guess, you know. Pre-trib problems with 2 Thessalonians 2, 1-4. Problem 1, precursors to the rapture and the day of the Lord. So the same old tired thing that we've been going through, this whole precursors thing, which it just simply doesn't relate to me at all. And I listened to a whole thing of Donnie interviewing Tommy McMurtry yesterday. And I went through the whole thing and just went, I think there was like one thing that related to me that was saying, oh, Israel are the elect. And I'm like, you know, all of Israel are going to be saved and all this sort of stuff. And I'm like, well, I've never really read the elect as being Israel there. I've always just seen it, the elect, as the church, you know. And then they'll go on about, oh, John Hagee says this, and it's like, oh, here we go, you know, some other weird thing. And like, I know there's weirdos out there, but it's like, I'm sure that there are in everything. Like say, Calvinism is a very popular thing. I don't just go to the Westboro Baptists and talk about what they believe, because they're Calvinists, okay? I don't talk about what they believe and sort of just try and debunk them and throw every Calvinist in the same camp, because there are people who believe different things. And the fact that Donnie, Tommy McMurtry, and others, they seem to think that we all believe these same things, you know. And so then you'll get the Ruckmanites, they'll believe, you know, that salvation's different in the tribulation, and so they'll harp on about that. So most of their theology is reactionary to bad IFB teaching. So it's reactionary to that. And so I'd look at it and go, yeah, well, that doesn't apply to me. No, that applies to Ruckmanism. It's not me. No, that doesn't apply to me either. And I go through it, and then they're like, see, we have completely demolished the pre-trib. And it's like, maybe some weirdos out there, but it's like, not me. And because the reason that they say that I'm a weirdo and all the rest of it, and yeah, is because I don't fit in with the IFB. So if I had a Ruckmanite, just a bog standard Ruckmanite type of position that they can easily debunk, then they would go, oh, well, we can deal with that. But because I'm like, okay, well, this is what the Scripture says. Let's get this word and let's have a look at it. They're like, oh, I've never heard of this before. Oh, you're strange. You're out there. Oh, people like Nick Sayers are out there. And I'm like, okay, well, let's look at the Scriptures. And so they're claiming to look at the Scriptures. But what they want to do is they want me to jump into a camp somewhere so they can debunk what I'm saying. I'm like, well, I don't belong in any camp. I'm just saying what the scriptures say, regardless of who is getting upset or whatever. I don't really care about people getting upset on any side. I don't care if pre-trib guys don't like me or whatever. I have little care about any of that. But at the end of the day, what I find is these guys are debunking low-hanging fruit. So this is a bit like what James White will do. He'll, just someone like Jeff Riddle, who will have some intelligence about him, and he'll start making a certain argument about a certain verse, and James White will just bring up, Gal Ripplinger, and have a picture of Stephen Anderson screaming or something like that. And it's like, it's quite amazing that these guys have been in bed with Anderson for so long. But it's like, just to make us think that the argumentation that Jeff Riddle is going to bring forth isn't going to be sound. So this guilt by association sort of thing. So they're like, all these pre-tribbers believe this. They are John Hagee, blood moons. I mean, I've mocked that since I've been a Christian. You look at these dumb things coming out. And I've even heard people say, in 1988, everyone was waiting for this rapture to happen because what guy wrote a book. And I'm thinking, well, everyone was, you know what I mean? Or just like a small little kooky handful of people. And the thing is, these guys want to say that about us. Let's just look at the mainstream group of, and I'm not talking about Kirshner and these other guys, I'm talking about the new IFB. Look at Anderson. You know what I mean? Like, James White has to, put a photo of Anderson there, or him standing on the pulpit screaming, or him saying that, gays should commit suicide, or, just some weird, bizarre thing that he says. And he has to do that and then go, King James only, TR only, and then show, myself, or show Jeff Riddle, or show Robert Truelove or someone else and say, see, they're the same picture. With these guys, actually, you just peel back the wallpaper and it's just Anderson fanboyism. And they won't admit it. That's the amazing thing. They are just like, no, we didn't. Well, like, it would be more honest for them to say, yeah, we were deeply influenced by Anderson to the back teeth, and still are. But, we just want to let you know that we've formulated our own teaching. Like, see, Tommy McMurtry thinks that he's departed from Anderson because he doesn't have the 70th week of Daniel thing going anymore. But he still has a whole bunch of other stuff going on. So he's just jumped into a Matt First camp. And but the amazing thing is, he's like, I'm going with Scripture, and I'm all glad that people are going with Scripture. But at the end of the day, if I go with Scripture, you're a kook. You don't fit in with the Ruckmanites. You don't fit in with these other guys. You're a weirdo. And I'm like, well, can't you see that I'm just you guys say that you need to read the Bible for yourself and get away from man and get away from the Larkin charts and blah, blah, blah. So it's like, okay, well, let's do that. And then you say, well, this is what I'm seeing. You're an idiot. So, okay, you're not a Christian. That's every time I comment on Tommy McMurtry's thing, nearly everyone in unison goes, not Christian, not Christian, not. It's just so amazing. But I expect that from cult members,
Means to fit with their thinking.
2 Thessalonians 2 poses the greatest problem.
The greatest problem? Oh, no, it doesn't. It's never been a problem for me. And as we're going to see when we go to the apostasia issue, it's not only not a problem, this is probably the greatest verse to prove a pre-trib rapture. So let's keep going.
For the pre-trib position, or certainly is one of the greatest problem passages for the pre-trib position. Because Paul does exactly what the majority of pre-tribbers say does not occur, and that is he gives us a list, a chronology of
a list. Now it's not just the falling away first, and that man of sin be revealed, something that happens after the falling away. No, it's a chronology of events now. And so the word, you may as well just get that word first and just throw it out, or just circle the whole thing and put first in, or bracket it all. It's just become one big event now.
of events specifically connected to the rapture.
We know that Paul was teaching that these two events would occur before the day of the Lord.
See, notice they've made this claim. Okay, well, these are going to occur before the day of the Lord now. So let's just look at the text. Okay, so that's not the Textus Receptus. Actually, that's copyrighted, so I shouldn't really be putting that up there. I'll just go to my site, I think. Okay, so what's going to happen? Maybe I'll just go to 2 Thessalonians 2. Okay, so now we beseech you, therefore, brethren, by the coming of our Lord Jesus Christ and by our gathering together unto him, that ye be not soon shaken in mind, nor be troubled by spirit, nor by word, nor by letter, as from us, as that the day of Christ is at hand. Let no one deceive you by any means, for that day shall not come. Now, notice that's in italics, but that's fine. I don't think anyone argues that the italics are wrong there or anything like that. For that day shall not come, except there come a falling away first. So the day is not going to come. It's going to be there's a triggering factor to this. Okay, and as I mentioned earlier in their in this video, the day of the Lord is triggered by the rapture in their timeline. So that at their 5 day I'm going hour day, 5 year and 1 quarter mark, the day of the Lord starts, and it's triggered by the rapture, where we are right at the beginning of the 7 years. The rapture happens, and the day of the Lord is triggered by the rapture there too. So I like that terminology, triggered by the rapture. So we see that the day of the Lord won't come except there come a falling away first. Okay, so that's what triggers the rapture. And then it's like, and that man of sin be revealed, the son of perdition. Now, how do I know that these are like two separate events? Because all we have to do is just read a few verses down. And it says, and you know what withholdeth, and so it has here holdeth, or restrains, that he might be revealed in his time. So there is a holding, there's a restraining, there's a holding back. For the mystery of iniquity doth already work. So listen to this very carefully. Only he that now letteth will let until he be taken out of the way. So he who restrains will restrain until he's taken out of the way. And then shall that wicked be revealed, whom the Lord shall consume with the spirit of his mouth and destroy with the brightness of his coming. So there's two things that happen here. Okay, so the letteth, the restrainer, the restraint will restrain until he be taken out of the way. Okay, so the restrainer is going to restrain until that is gone. And then it says, and then shall that wicked be revealed. Okay, so clearly the word then. So this is after that, the wicked will be revealed, whom the Lord shall consume with the spirit of his mouth and shall destroy with the brightness of his coming. So that is talking about at the end of the 7 years. Okay, so yeah, even him whose coming is after the working of Satan with all power and signs and lying wonders. And so it's talking about the coming of the Antichrist there. But this is talking about the coming of Christ, whom the Lord shall consume with the spirit of his mouth. And so what we're looking at here is there are two events here as well. So let no man deceive you by any means, that day shall not come, except there come a falling away first, and that man of sin be revealed, the son of perdition. Now notice the language here. Only he that now will let until he's taken out of the way, and then that man of sin be revealed. Notice the same type of language here. and that man of sin be revealed, the son of perdition. So it's talking about the two same events. So this is strong internal evidence, because we see there is a taking away of that which restrains here. And we see here is we see the same type of terminology for the Antichrist, but we see this departure, the falling away. Okay, so we're going to look more and more at the falling away issue, but let's just continue with what they're saying. So they're making out that these two things have to happen before the day of the Lord, where the teaching that I have is that the rebellion, which I wouldn't call a rebellion, I would call it the falling away is a perfect rendition, or the Geneva Bible has departure. So sometimes just because people have this mindset of falling away is a religious thing, falling away is a religious thing, I'm like, okay, falling away / departure, just to get their mind thinking outside of that box. Because sometimes it's a bit like if I was reading in James where it said they're wearing gay clothing. Well, obviously that doesn't mean that they're dressing up like that. You know what I mean? And so sometimes you might have to, if they kept thinking that, and go, oh, they're wearing gay clothing, they're wearing gay, you just might go gay / fancy, you know what I mean? And that's all I'm doing with the falling away / departure. I'm just trying to get people's mindset away from, falling away is a spiritual thing, falling away from the faith, the great falling away, and all this other baggage that ends up on that word. So they're saying these two things have to happen before the day of the Lord, where I'm like, no, the falling away triggers the day of the Lord, and then afterwards that Antichrist is revealed. So when you couple verse 3 with verse 7, 6, 7, and 8, it's clear that there are two things mentioned, and it clearly says, he that now letteth will let until he is taken away, and then. So it's talking about one event's going to happen, and then another event's going to happen after that. It doesn't specifically say that's the next event, but it's going to happen later on from that event.
In part because he uses the specific Greek word proton or protos, which is often translated first, and is specifically used here to describe when these two events would take place in relationship to the day of the Lord.
Okay, so he's saying, okay, proton here. So notice the comma is gone, okay. For that day will not come, comma, unless the rebellion comes first. And even in their version, I'm not even sure what it is, the comma is missing. And that man of sin be revealed, comma. So that they've gotten rid of the comma there because they want this, they desperately want to have this be one big sentence. They desperately want to have these two events be one event. Because if these two events are separate, like they are just a few verses later when they're re-described, then that opens up a whole can of worms that they have to deal with. Actually, I'll just go through some of these comments. Church Phone 1611, and the fruit of righteousness is a tree of life, and he that winneth souls is wise. Yeah, so that might have been in relation to what I said earlier. And so the only reason I was saying it seems toxic when I hear the new IFB guys say that is because usually it's sort of like I don't know, it's a bit like having a school teacher who would scold you if you weren't perfectly on time each time, you know what I mean? And really pride themselves that we keep time, you know, sort of thing. We're punctual. And it actually, where before that you're always on time, but now you feel like all this stress about that. And it's like soul winning should just be something that naturally occurs. And, you know, I mean, you look at the Reuben Israelites of the world. Now, I know he passed away recently. But, you know, some of these guys were street screeching and evangelizing, I call it. They go out there and they're like, you know, you're going to burn in hell, you wicked whore, and you bitch. And they're swearing and they're coming against people. And I'm just like, man, these guys are toxic. And I think that they're probably doing a lot of damage. I mean, Paul said, "Look, I'm glad that the gospel gets preached anyway, regardless of if it's in malice or whether it's with the right motives or whatever." But I remember when I went to the United States, I had a guy come up to me on a bike, and he had like a Jewish star on his hat. He was a black guy, and he come up to me and he goes, "The Lord Jesus Christ commands you to repent. You need to repent." And he just started screaming at me, and I'm like, okay. And I thought it was going to be a full punch on. I'm like, okay, this guy's fully attacking me. Has he got a gun? A lot of people in America have guns. And the people next to me, like the guy rode off, the people next to me said, "That's the weirdest thing." And I said, "Look, the strange thing is I'm a Christian. I actually would have liked to have talked to him. But because it was just a monologue, a machine gun, like, 'Hey, you,' and just screaming at me. If I was a non-Christian, I would have just gone, 'Man, these guys are jerks.' And it's just not, it's just not how you should be preaching the gospel." And then I remember in San Francisco, there was one guy there preaching, and he had the microphone, and it was so loud, and he was just sort of belittling people, and he looked like he was drunk. And so I'm like, okay, that's not really good. And then I was in Washington, D.C., and there was a guy with the microphone really close to his mouth going, "You're all going to burn in hell. You're going to die. Jesus is going to burn you. You're all going to die." And I'm just thinking, where is the balance of just someone just saying, "Hey, the Bible says God so loved the world, he gave his only son." Go through the Romans road, go through, just preach scripture, you don't, and trying not to be the biggest jerk in town. So this is where you start going, some people are street screeching and are vandalizing, where, and when I'm here, Andersonites go, "Oh, we're soul winning." What I hear is they're going around saying, "Hey, believe in God, and then if you want to commit suicide, it's perfectly fine." I wouldn't do it personally, but you can. You'll go straight to heaven. Like Anderson does. That's his teachings. It's like these new IFB guys are teaching that sort of stuff. It's so weird. And I just cringe. I just think, how many people are listening to this rubbish? Are there, who out there is just preaching the normal word of God? Anyway. So that's why I have, a bit of a beef with them going, "We are a soul-winning church." It's like, we go out obnoxiously just destroying people's confidence that there's any rational Christians out there. Helg says, "I, John, who am your brother and companion in tribulation and of the kingdom and patience of Jesus Christ." Different tribulation from the one in 7:14. Great tribulation. Yeah, absolutely. This is where they conflate the two. And it's a big problem with theirs, and they keep repeating it. They're doubling down on that, and they're thumping the pulpit now and saying, "It's tribulation, just do a search. Just do a Strong's Concordance search on tribulation. You'll see that's what it means." It's like, yeah, but are you reading the context? And that's exactly correct, because John was not going through the tribulation. He's going through tribulation, but not the great tribulation. So good point.
The Greek is very specific.
Okay, so we've got Alan Kirshner. He's going to tell us what the Greek says.
Uses the term protos, and it means before or first.
Protos, superlative of pro. So you got apo, means to. Apo means from, and to is pro. A contrast from pro atos. I'm trying to read this blurry word here. The Doric pratos comparison. Okay, so the Septuagint has Rashin, I think it is. So let's just go to my website. I'm pretty sure I've got this here. Just hoping I didn't close my website down. No, I didn't. Here it is. Okay. I can't specifically see that Hebrew word there, so but we'll just keep going through that. Either in time or place, in any successional thing or purpose. Okay, so this is protos, the word first. So either in time or place or in any succession of things or persons. And so, okay, we're not showing these other things absolutely without the noun, substantively with the article hoprotos, kai ho eschatos, the eternal one. So it's interesting. That would be Revelation 1:8. Hoprotos, kai ho eschatos, the first and the last. Okay, so that would be a coupled sequence. But notice it's nothing to do with a Granville Sharp rule. Both of them have the definite article there, etc. So let's just keep going.
So Paul here is teaching explicitly that two events have to happen before the day of the Lord.
Yeah, the fact that
it's not two events have to happen before the day of the Lord. It's clearly the falling away first, and then that man of sin be revealed. And why am I putting then there? Well, all you have to do is just look at the context. So I might even just get the KJV, Second Thessalonians. Just sort of like the normal letter KJV one, so I can show it to you very clearly. Okay, so that day shall not come except there come a falling away first, and that man of sin be revealed, the son of perdition. Now here only he that now let will let until he be taken out of the way, until he had departed, and then that wicked will be revealed. Talking about and that man of sin be revealed. So there's a link here. Okay, so it's very clear that this is echoing verse 3, and so that's why. But here you have the word then. It says, and then shall that wicked be revealed. So it's not so much, okay, well, this has got to happen and this is going to happen at the same time. It's like he that now let will let until he's taken out of the way. That's like the drawbridge, like the gate is open and then that wicked's revealed. And so looking at that type of thing, it fits in perfectly with what we're saying, that there's a falling away first and that man of sin is revealed. So there are these two events. So you don't have the man of sin be revealed until this other thing happens first. And so they're just trying to make these into two events that are the same.
Paul says these
which is with the pre-Wrath crowd, we see that quite a lot. And we see the Andersonites, they just pancake everything on top of each other until it's just ridiculous. But at least these guys, they separate a few things here and there. But this thing, they're just throwing on top of each other.
Things must happen first.
Just say the word first, and that means it'll include the sentence after it.
It's important. He doesn't just say these things must happen, but these must happen first.
The second problem for pre-tribulationists is that at least one of the precursors mentioned here, the revealing of the man of lawlessness, is an event that takes place at the midpoint of the 7-year period.
And I would agree totally with that.
And most significantly, this revealing of the man of lawlessness, which Paul describes in saying he will set himself up in God's temple, proclaiming himself to be God, which places the revealing of the Antichrist at the midpoint. So the coming of our Lord and our being gathered to him cannot occur until after the midpoint of the 70th week.
Take a look at this chart detailing the views of 5 prominent
So you see how they twisted that they have to have this word first, encompassing the falling away and the man of sin being revealed. There can't be a separation there. It can't be the falling away first, and after that, then the man of sin be revealed, because it it ruins their timeline. So they've adjusted their whole timeline to these type of things. And so
pre-tribulationists about 2 Thessalonians 2, and you get a sense that they have fundamentally different, often mutually exclusive ways of explaining this section of Scripture.
okay, so we'll go back there. Now, okay, so you got John MacArthur, John Walvoord, David Cusick, Craig Blazing, and Renell Showers. I only know of John MacArthur there, but maybe I'm just ignorant of these latest and greatest Rapture teachers. So, okay, the coming in verse 1, Rapture, Rapture. So they all think that. Gathering, okay, so this guy thinks it's Armageddon. Day of the Lord, not Rapture, Rapture. Okay, so this one guy thinks it's a Rapture. In verse 2, the apostasy, verse 3, abomination of desolation, religious rebellion, worldwide rebellion, unknowable religious rebellion. So there's absolutely no one who thinks that apostasia is a departure. So then proton, first, during, first. And so, I mean, see, the thing is, like I've said before many times, these guys are like, well, you know, they don't even agree with each other. The pre-trib guys, show me these pre-wrath guys who have, I talk to these people, they're like, well, I've got my own different thing on the Daniel 70th week, and I've got my own definition of Jacob's trouble, and I've got my own definition of, you know, how many years, you know, the tribulation period is a 75-day period, and, you know, it's all over the place. And so at least with following a cult leader like Anderson, people have like a cohesive type of teaching, because, you know, they're going to teach the same about the Jews, the same about the Sodomites, the same about, you know, whatever Alex Jones is talking about on the radio that day. They're going to believe that, yes, sir, and they believe it, you know, and half the time they're still believing it, even though they won't admit that they follow him. But when you've got people thinking for themselves and all in different groups, I mean, I think it's actually, these guys are just putting these names up there, and it's like, well, I don't agree necessarily with any of these guys. And so, but if you put the pre-wrath guys up here and what they believe, it would be all over the place as well. And so with many different people I've talked to, they're rebuking me for something, and I'm like, well, doesn't Kirshner believe this? Oh, I don't follow him. You know, it's like, okay. And then what Anderson says is, I don't follow him either. Okay, well, Tommy McMurtry, I don't follow him either. Or who? You know what I mean? And so you can say this about anyone. You can say this about, you know, what people think the mark of the beast is. Is the mark of the beast, is it economic? Or you get, you know, I can put a chart up. A 7-day Adventist will go, oh, no, probably not. It's to do with worship and putting your hand in the air and all this weird stuff that they say. So some people will say certain things about it. Some people won't. But it's like, I just find this whole thing of just the group thing, where it's like, well, pre-tribulationists, I mean, I don't agree with John MacArthur on a lot of things. And so, but apparently I've got to agree with him on eschatology. You know what I mean? Or else I'm not, you know, we don't have this cohesive pre-trib group, you know.
Different, often mutually exclusive ways of explaining this section of Scripture. But despite this confusion, there are some pre-trib arguments about 2 Thessalonians 2 that are more common than others. For example, the most common way that...
Okay, so it just has, number one, Paul didn't really mean first. I don't know. So maybe someone's saying this, but it's like, no, he means first. And literally he's saying that the falling away will not, until the falling away happens first. That day should not come until the falling away happens first. And that man of sin will be revealed. And so that will happen after that.
That are more common than others. For example, the most common way that pre-tribulationists deal with this is to say that Paul did not actually mean that these two events would happen before the day of the Lord. Rather, he meant that these two events will happen during or be features of the day of the Lord. For example,
And see, notice too, he's taken the Bible version that has rebellion there. Now, some have apostasy, some have rebellion. Now, we know how poor a lot of the Bible versions are in modern Christianity. They're just hopeless. And so, but what we would see is that anyone who hasn't liked the Pretrib Rapture position, they would be pushing to have these words like rebellion, apostasy, words that in English are very restrained. Now, but the thing is, even the word rebellion, what is a rebellion? It's a separatist group. It's a separation from one group from another. So you have a rebellion. I mean, usually a rebellion, if I was to talk about a rebellion and a revolution are very similar things. And so, but usually contextually, a rebellion happens within an army. So it's almost like a mutiny sort of thing. But it is used in earlier historical writings as a rebellion, like akin with a revolution. And so you could have, the Bolsheviks rebelling against the Tsars. But it is a spatial departure that they shot them. It wasn't just they just sat on their couch at home and like, we're in rebellion against you. Our middle finger is stuck up at you on the inside, sort of thing. It's like, no, they're getting guns and they're going and shooting people. And the Americans, they rebelled against the British. There was a rebellion there. Was that bloodless? Was that not spatial? Was certainly spatial. They were kicking people. They kicked the British out. They rebelled against them, and they did it well, And even some of these words that are used, it's rebellion. And so one of the things that Donnie from Standing for Truth likes to say is, it means apostasy. Don't you realize that apostasy means apostasy, sort of thing? It's like that's an English word that comes from the Greek that is very slim in its definition. An apostasy in English just means to usually apostatize from the faith. So that's what these guys are. That's the depth that these guys go to. They're like, let's look up in an English dictionary apostasy. That's what it means. It's like, so you're saying that the Greek word means only that. It's just quite amazing. But anyway.
In his commentary, David Guzik says of this problem, Paul will not describe events which must precede the rapture, but events that are concrete evidence of the day of the Lord. They are saying that Paul wasn't saying these two events would come before the day of the Lord. Rather, Paul was just naming things that happen during the day of the Lord.
Where my position is that the first thing triggers the rapture, and the second thing is in the day of the Lord, which I think is very clear.
Despite this denial that Paul meant these things would happen before the day of the Lord, being one of the most common ways pre-tribulationists deal with this problem, pre-tribulationists never seem to...
So I don't want to skip that. Paul, sometimes it's really hard when people are talking, but they're not talking about what's on the screen. Paul will not describe events which must precede the rapture, but events that are concrete evidence of the day of the Lord. Okay, so it's the same thing that he said.
Pre-tribulationists deal with this problem. Pre-tribulationists never seem to explain why they feel it's okay to ignore the grammar of this passage, such as the Greek word proton.
No one's ignoring the grammar here. If anything, you guys are conflating the first part of this verse with the second part of the verse and not recognizing that there is an order here. Unless the falling away comes first, comma, and that man of sin be revealed. And so, and then looking at the context, which is very clear, as we mentioned earlier, where it has, except there come a falling away first, and that man of sin be revealed. And the context here is only he that letteth will let until he be taken out of the way, and then shall that wicked be revealed. So here, and that mannish sin be revealed, that wicked be revealed. It's the same thing. So we should really conclude that this who letteth is akin to what is happening here first, a falling away. So to me, that context is very clear. But that's not my whole argument. But to me, that just makes sense. If I'm reading through the Bible, I see things that are comparative and that are talking about the same event and in the same context. It's not just some other verse. It's not the next chapter. It's right in. It's in line with what's being said, and then it's talking about that wicked being revealed, and it's talking about the man of sin being revealed. But then it's talking about the falling away happening, and then it's talking about he that letteth will let until he is taken out of the way. To me, it just makes perfect sense. And so,
which means that these two events must come before the day of the Lord. You can confirm this by looking at...
Okay, so, yeah, first, comma, and that man of sin be revealed.
Must come before the day of the Lord.
So these guys are saying it has to happen before the day of the Lord. Some people are saying it's after the day of the Lord, where I'm saying no, the falling away is the opposite side of harpazo. Now, I'm going to explain this fully because I know some people are like falling away. That just seems really weird. When you understand, well, I'll go through it soon because I don't want to just give you a short bit, and we'll continue on with what they're saying, and then I will explain myself as we go through.
You can confirm this by looking at other places in the New Testament where the same Greek construction occurs.
Okay, so they're saying you just have to sort of piece these together with the same Greek construction and you'll get it. So unless in May the rebellion comes first. Okay. So May, if I hate transliterations of the Greek, but ume seems to be, I think it's the strongest Greek negative, I'm pretty sure.
The same conditional word, aeon.
So I'll get the Greek up from my website here. And, oh yeah, in May. Okay. Yeah, so the May is a negative. Ume is the strongest Greek negative, and that's what I thought it was. But so unless that's not going to happen until the falling away comes first, the proton. Okay, that's fine.
On May, paired with proton, always means one thing comes before the other.
Okay, so doesn't that make my case? Okay, so they're saying if you have this Greek construction, it means one thing will happen and then something else will happen, which is exactly what I'm saying. So it's not two events that are in one. In May, you have the apostasia. Okay. And that's the proton. See, the proton is not relative to the anthropos, the son of perdition. And so hopefully you can see that, the May that he's talking about. So then you have the apostasia is going to come first, okay? And then end the man, the anthropos, Leos, the son of perdition, is revealed. So these are separate things, and one of them has the word first that is attached to it. Notice the word proton is not relative to the man of sin.
Our law doesn't condemn a man unless, aeon me, it first, proton, hears from him and learns what he is doing, does it?
So this is where they're looking at the conjunction, the K, and that can be used in many different ways. You can use a conjunction to tie two things together, like they're claiming, but it can also be used to have things in a chronological order. And so just because you have an and there, and the K can mean also, it can mean then, it can mean and, it can mean many different conjunctions.
Another example of the same construction is in Mark 3, verse 27. But no one can enter a strong man's house to plunder his property unless, eon me, he first, proton, ties up the strong man. Then, tate, indeed the house can be plundered.
So, I mean, to me, this works in with my my perspective. Okay, so you've got the eon me, unless he first, proton. So the first thing that happens is he's tying a strong man. So, and then you can plunder the house. So you don't go in and plunder the house and the strong man's not tied up yet. So this is like a sequence. So you got the strong man first. Like if you wouldn't say you tie up the strong man and you plunder the house first, would you? That wouldn't make any sense. So I can't even understand these. These guys are like, we're going to the Greek, but they're actually destroying their own argument. Like, just think about it. But no one can enter the strong man's house to plunder his property unless he first ties up or binds the strong man, and then tote, indeed, the house can be plundered. So naturally, you would think, okay, the strong man's got to be tied up first. You know, you're not going to get the goods until you get past the man. So which is first? Getting the goods? Is that first? No, that's secondary to this. You got to tie up that strong man. So when you put that into the context of, let's just go back here. You know, here we have unless the falling away comes first, and the man is sin is revealed, the son of perdition. So that's secondary to this happening first. It's like the strong man being bound, and then you can plunder the goods, sort of thing. And it's like, I don't know why they actually even showed this example, because it just, I think they're actually trying to disprove this other example that, you know, it's going to happen in the day of the Lord or whatever. And this is the problem. They're showing so many different perspectives that inadvertently they've sort of backed up my perspective. So anyway, okay, so like even this, our Lord does not condemn a man unless it first, proton, hears from him and learns what he's doing. So are you going to first learn what you're doing and then secondarily hear from him? No. You hear from someone, and that inadvertently causes you to learn what they're doing. So that would be a little bit more on their page, okay? But still, it would fit in with mine as well, because you have the falling away triggering the rapture, also the falling away triggering the day of the Lord, and then in the day of the Lord, you've got the abomination of desolation. But this one here, definitely, it's like, are you going to say binding the strong man and plundering the house are to do with the proton or protos? They're just saying proton because that's just how it appears, that inflection in that context. But it's like, it's not really, it doesn't do them any favors. Anyway, let's continue.
But no one can enter a strong man's house to plunder his property unless, eon me, he first, proton, ties up the strong man. Then, tate, indeed the house can be plundered. Mark 3, verse 27. These two examples that share the same Greek construction with 2 Thessalonians 2, verse 3, confirm that the correct reading here is that before the day of the Lord begins, two events must happen first.
two events must happen first now. So he's gone back to the two. It's just ridiculous, because in the strongman one, are they happening first? You're binding a strongman and then you're plundering his goods first. No, it says you bind the strongman first, then you can plunder his. It's like this is so ridiculous. Like, I mean, I sort of feel sorry for them bringing this up, and I don't know how many people have critiqued this. It's been around for about 3 years. But, I mean, this is really lousy, and you don't have to be a scholar. You don't have to be a savant to figure this out. You just, I mean, you guys are looking at it going, yeah, that's pretty bad.
The rebellion and the revelation of the man of lawlessness.
So at the end of the day, with all these interpretations, the 800-pound gorilla is the word protos.
The 800-pound gorilla is the word protos, and we'll show you examples which will actually back up the fact that the protos is related to the apostasia first, and not to both the apostasia and the man of sin.
Another popular way that pre-tribulationists try to deal with second.
So their 800-pound gorilla just bashed himself in the head with a brick.
Thessalonians 2 relates.
Okay, so what are they saying here? Paul didn't really mean first. Okay, so we saw
Popular way that pre-tribulationists.
The apostasy is the rapture. Okay, so this is where it's going to get interesting. So this is where I'm going to explain the whole concept of apostasia.
Try to deal.
Now, notice they're not saying the apostasia is the rapture. They're saying the English word apostasy is the rapture, which is ridiculous. It's like I was saying before, the gay clothing means, apparel. No, gay, everyone knows gay means, something else. And it's like the apostasy is the rapture. No, it should say apostasia is the rapture. Okay, and I'm going to show you clearly, and you won't be able to unsee it after I've shown you.
With 2 Thessalonians 2 relates to the word rebellion.
Notice it's not relates to the word falling away or relates to the word, apostasy. It relates to the word rebellion. Like, so they've gone as far as they can from the meaning of the word, as far away as they can, so that you have to peel back those layers of onion before you get just to the general argument. They should really be saying, unless the apostasia happens, which can be translated in some contexts as rebellion, some contexts as departure, some contexts as a falling away, some contexts as this, and that, instead of it's just rebellion, So let's see.
Sometimes translated as falling away.
Okay, so they do a little bit of that. I'll bite my tongue.
Or apostasy in verse 3.
But the thing is, what is a good translation of that? Is apostasy a good translation of it? Because if you look up the word apostasy, it only means, in English, it's very narrow. In the Greek, it's a very colorful word. So we're going to see that.
It is one of the two things that are supposed to happen before the day of the Lord.
No, but I don't want to keep correcting them when they just keep repeating that. It's the first thing that's going to happen, which triggers the day of the Lord, and then that man of sin is revealed.
This is usually understood to mean a falling away from the faith.
Okay, so look at this. Notice apostasy from aphistomai, a falling away, a defection in the Bible from true religion. Okay, so notice they're not sort of saying anything else. But the thing is, if you get Bible translators who are going to translate it as rebellion or specifically apostasy, then they have a bias in their translation. Now, what I find is if you so Straight Gay says, you'll ignore William, he is crazy full preterist. Okay, so what you find is they're like, say, Mark Ward, he'll just go to modern definition. If you go to older definitions, he's like, why are you going to older definitions? And that's because they want to sell stuff on Logos, But these guys, that oftentimes they're going to modern definitions because they back up the modern Bibles. See, it's not just just a slight difference in word here. This is because sometimes it's not the underlying Greek that is causing a translational problem. It's the way things are defined. So this is sort of like the elephant in the room that no one talks about when it comes to the Westcott and Hort text. They're like, oh, the Westcott and Hort text is different. It's got, say even the Nestle Alarm text. It's got the 8,000 changes. It's got 2,900 less Greek words. And so, that would cause problems straight away. But oftentimes they don't talk about how things have been redefined. And so many times redefined to the point where they're trying to get away with watering down the virgin birth, and they're trying to change things to instead of only begotten, it becomes unique, one of a kind, and all this sort of strange things. And as you'll see, Kirshner, he appeals to D.A. Carson, who would say things like that. He would say, oh, well, monogenes means unique, and so that's how we got to view it. And it's like, so he would say that people who don't believe in that are committing fallacies. And he's written a book on fallacies where he's committing these type of fallacies, and Kirshner is sort of just repeating these and using that type of terminology for this. And so notice the whole time I have not gone to epistemi. I've deliberately, specifically not gone to epistemi. So have apostasia being the noun, then you have epistemi being the verb. And so if you go to the verb, there are so many words that just say departure, left, they moved away, all this sort of stuff. And so I'm not going there, because these guys claim that it's a fallacy to do so. So all of my research has only been with apostasia, and specifically apostasia, looking at it in the way it's written in 2 Thessalonians 2:3 and Acts, I think it's chapter 21, verse 21, and then looking at the LXX. And so as we will see, it clearly we don't have to go to epistemi. I'm only not going there because Kirshner makes out that this is a root fallacy. Okay, so I had this thrown at me by Donnie and Praise I Am on the Standing for Truth show. They're like, you're committing the root fallacy. It's like, I have to go to the root to commit this fallacy. You know what I mean? Like, I hadn't even gone into the etymology of the word, really. And they're like, you're committing an etymological fallacy. And it's like, no. It's like I haven't even done the mathematical equation yet, and you're saying that I'm doing the mathematical equation wrong. And I'm like, well, I have to do a mathematical equation to do it wrong. It's like, it's so dumb. But they were just reading Kirshner, and I think they were just desperately just trying to shut me up.
That is, Christians apostatizing or leaving the faith of Christianity.
So notice this, what they're doing is they're getting one word, apostasia, and they're putting onto it a whole bunch of baggage. So sometimes the word appears in different contexts. So it's a bit like when we look at the word agape or philia. We might have agapeo or phileo, I love. And people will say, phileo means I love a pizza. I love my hat. I love my T-shirt. I love my cup. Or, you wouldn't say that. I love but when you go through the Bible and the usage of the Bible, it does say the love of God, and it's using phileo. I love God. And so agape is used in the same way. And if you actually look through in the Gospel of John, right at the end, where Jesus is saying to Peter, do you love me, Peter? He uses agape, I think it is, or phileo. I can't remember which way it goes around, but he uses the word twice. And then on the third time, he says, you know that I love you. And he said, because he said the third time, I agape, but he'd actually said phileo twice, proving that these are synonyms. Now, if you just go to a standard book like Berry's, it just clearly says that they're synonyms. I mean, I can't see here. It's my interlinear Bible. It should be here. But if you look at their synonyms, it just clearly says that agapeo and phileo are synonymous. So agape and philia, they're synonymous. And so you see this type, that's one of the most popular Greek word problems that you hear pastors say. They're like, well, I just come out of seminary. You realize there's a difference between agape and philia, phileo, agapeo. They're different. One is the love of God and one's the love of a pizza, and it's like, it's completely wrong. But this is the sort of rubbish that they're teaching in these schools. And like I said, you don't have to be a savant to figure these things out. It's quite basic. It's quite simple. If you just don't listen to these guys most of the time and just search around on the net and look for alternative views, usually you find someone just saying something that's very clear and very accurate. And usually if you use the King James as a dictionary for Greek words, and you just look up the old English word, you usually get the exact definition. And I've been mocked for saying that, but it is true. I mean, I've done a lot of studies, and at the end of the day, it's like Oxford English Dictionary. There it is. It's right there, right in front of me. So anyway, let's just let Alan Kirshner continue.
Recently, some pre-tribulationists have put forward the idea that the word behind this word rebellion, apostasia in the Greek, means the rapture.
And so looking at it from a certain perspective, you could go, oh, the rapture, and it can tend to grind, but I'm going to show you how this flows.
The idea is that Paul was teaching that the rapture would happen first, and then the man of lawlessness would be revealed.
Absolutely.
This is
exactly what I think. So that day will not come unless, and in the Geneva Bible, this word here is just named departure, unless the departure comes first and the man of sin is revealed. And so the whole reason, like, they put then there, and I know that I've been saying that, but that is because if we look at if I read it so that you guys will understand this concept by, defining falling away as departure, because falling away has the baggage with it, except there come a departure first and the man of sin be revealed. Here it has, he that now letteth will let until he be taken out of the way, until there's a departure, and then shall that wicked be revealed. But here it has, and that man shall be revealed, that wicked will be revealed. Here it's talking about, except there come a departure first. Here it's saying, until it be taken out of the way. And so the only reason that sometimes I'm inserting then there is because it has, and then shall that wicked be revealed. So if we are understanding that these are linked verses, that the then here also applies here. Now, I wouldn't add to the word of God like that, but I do, in my mind, I do that. So just letting you guys know that I do that. And like, to me, that is pretty much exactly what I am thinking that this verse means. For that day, the day of the Lord will not come unless the departure, unless the snatching away, unless there is a separation, unless that comes first, which is a rapture, and the man of lawlessness be revealed. Now, we're going to look more and more into that, so let's continue.
Usually done to preserve the all-important pre-trib doctrine of imminence.
Okay, so here we go, the imminent straw man again. The reason that they do this is because they want to restore this. No, I haven't done that. I don't have that presupposition to have no prophesied events before the rapture. I look for the signs of the times. I look for persecution in the church. I look for wars, rumors of wars, famines, pestilences, all these things building up. It's the beginning of sorrows. I look for all that. I don't think that's in the tribulation. I think that's pre-rapture. Okay. And so they're like, oh, the whole reason behind people thinking like this is because of this. No, because I came to this conclusion and I don't think like this. So that means that you guys are wrong. People are looking through this and reading this because the words falling away, because people are putting words either in new versions like rebellion or apostasy there, or they're putting words, theological terms like the great falling away, or the great falling away from the faith. And they're just adding these words to it where it doesn't say that. It just means a departure. Okay.
That no events can come before the rapture.
But in 2 Thessalonians, they come to this text, they got real problem. They know it's difficult.
Who knows it's well, it's difficult.
They know it poses a great problem for their position. And so what do?
Okay, so it's like, oh, we've got this problem, so let's just make something up. Yeah, so this is really quite annoying when you hear this, and this is the type of thing Donnie does and McMurtry. They just sort of say, oh, these guys just make it up because they're so desperate. They have to have these rescue devices. No, if I saw something that contradicted my position, I would change my position. It's as simple as that. But they're like, no, because we're right, you're wrong, and so you're just stubborn, and you're pig-headed, you can't think properly, you're a bit of a moron, and so you're because you don't have a proper answer somewhere, you have to make this stuff up, and it becomes really annoying. At least Donnie and McMurtry won't be passive aggressive about it. They'll just vomit all over you. Well, these guys are really passive aggressive. They're like, well, that they desperately have to, have a rescue device, and they have to, what do? Well, they take a word and they change it, just as if that's all that's involved with it. We're just scratching our head going, we can just change that word and it fits in there. Yay, we've got the rapture again. And it's like, no, look at the historical meaning of the word. And we're going to look at apostasia in the Koine period, meaning a departure.
They take a word, departure. Apostasy, say, aha, this word is referring to the rapture.
So notice the jump. It means apostasy. But let's just go through what he just said here.
And so what do? They take a word, apostasy, say, aha, this word is referring to the rapture.
So what they're trying to do is make you think that the word means the English term apostasy, and people are just desperately going, let's get rid of that and put the word rapture here. Okay. Now, it doesn't specifically say rapture. Now, if we say departure, and then we can relate it to the rapture. So this is where these guys, they know that they're doing these word games. They know that the word apostasia does not equal the word apostasy. Now, there in certain contexts it can, because it can be a departure from the faith. It can be a departure from, if I throw my bottle in the bin and it goes off to the rubbish tip, it's a departure. It's gone. It's a departure of anything. So it can be something that's spatial and something that's non-spatial.
The falling away, the taking away of the believers on the earth.
This interpretation has two serious problems.
So notice they're not saying problems with the apostasia equals rapture theory. They're saying problems with the apostasy rapture theory. Because people go, oh, what does apostasy mean? Like, Donnie's, it's like, it means an apostasy. It's like, yeah, that's an English word. It's an English word that they've derived from the Greek. There are tons of words that we have from Greek, from Latin, that when we bring them over, they mean a specific thing in English, but it can be only 5% of what it means in the Greek or in the Latin. So you got to look at these things. And see, what I've realized is these guys from the new IFB, they really have followed Carl Riplinger down that path where they're not really allowed to look at Greek and Hebrew words. So strange. That's just become like a bog standard thing where it's like, we use Bible words and all this sort of stuff. And it's like, that's why Stephen Anderson believes that Jesus roasted like a chicken in hell for 3 days and 3 nights. And that type of concept is from the kooky type of King James onlyism, the weirdo sort of stuff, and so But yeah, here it's like problems with the apostasy equals rapture theory. No, it should be problems with the apostasia equals rapture theory. It's completely different. So they've got different arguments here. So let's just go to Google and let's type in apostasy meaning. Okay, so people will go, oh, what's apostasy mean? Apostasy, an abandonment or renunciation of religious or political breath. So that's all that it means. But then apostasia, as we're going to see, has way more meaning than that. So, you know, faithfulness, betrayal, desertion, heresy. So then someone like Donnie's like, see, it means an apostasy. Yeah, if you're going to follow the modern versions, that's how they do translate it. So let's go to 2 Thessalonians. And we'll go to Bible Gateway. In all English translations. So look, Amplified Bible, apostasy. The CSB, don't even know what that is. There's so many Bibles now. Apostasy, the CJB, apostasy, Darby. So he's like, oh, you guys follow Darby, blah, blah, blah. He says it's unless the apostasy. You're following Darby, Tommy McMurtry. You're following Darby, Donnie. You know, it's like, it's so ridiculous. Like these guys, it just makes me wonder how much study these guys have done on this. So we're going to see how much. Okay, so Great Rebellion, apostasy. You know, apostasy comes first. The Holman Christian Standard Bible, the LSB, the new one. Unless the apostasy comes first. First the apostasy, second the Message Bible. First the apostasy, second the debut of the Antichrist. Blah blah blah. The New American Bible Revised Edition, apostasy, NASB, apostasy. So as you can see, when they're saying, oh, it just means apostasy, they're actually agreeing with all these modern versions. Now, wouldn't you think that coming along with the New American Standard Bible, now, if I just go back a little bit, let's go to Bible Hub. Now, if I go to the Greek here, on Bible Hub's a great place to go and do study. You'll get all sorts of strange things, but you get some good things. Okay, so let's look at, they translate apostasy as apostasy. Now, let's go to 646 and have a look at this. Okay, so they're saying it's a defection and a revolt. So notice that Strong's isn't saying apostasy at all, but then it's apostasia. Okay, usage, defection. Okay, apostasy, revolt. Okay, so there we go. But then we have the new NAS, exhaustive. Okay, so apostasy or forsake. But it does say it's from aphistomai. That goes against their argument that we're going to see in a second. So it's all over the place. And see, the thing is, this is the New American Standard Bible. These guys have a bias. We go through Thayer's, Strong's. Anyway, I think you get the point. They're not saying apostasia here. They're saying apostasy, which is a completely different word. I'm just trying to think of a word in English that would be similar. So you could have something that's completely transliterated, but in the original language, it means something so much more. I guess it's like the word metamorphosis. We use the English word metamorphosis, and that means when a grub becomes a butterfly. But metamorphosis, when it's being used in the Bible, like in Romans chapter 12, it means something so much more. And so it's just because we've borrowed so many Greek and Latin words. Anyway, I won't harp on that. Let's continue.
The first is the complete lack of any evidence that the word apostasia can mean the rapture.
Oh my God. these poor guys, I'm just about to absolutely destroy them. Watch this. Not only has it been used as a rapture, I'll just show you. Now, when we go through the usage of words, we look at everything. We look at, first we look at the Bible, we look at definitions, we look at how things are being translated, we look at Latin, we look at Hebrew, we look at all things. And so many times they go to the Septuagint. So we look at other usages. The other main usage is in Acts chapter 21, verse 21. It has forsake, okay? But they're saying, okay, it's to forsake Moses in a sense of forsaking his teachings. So there's a departure of forsaking from the teachings of Moses. So they're saying, okay, because it has that there, that means it's a falling away from the faith or from the teachings in 2 Thessalonians. Okay, so I'm going to show you. Now, if I was to say, when was the Koine Greek period? Look at this, Koine Greek period. It's a basic search. Look at this, Koine, the fairly uniform Hellenistic Greek spoken and written from the 4th century BC until the time of the Byzantine Emperor Justinian, mid-6th century AD. So, but don't these guys sort of say the Koine period is like 200 years before and 200 years after Christ? Why do they do that? Because they know that there are examples of the apostasy being a rapture in 450. Okay, so we're going to see that. So that's the Encyclopedia Britannica. It's not exactly like just, King James only, whatever they want to make out to be, Koine Greek. Okay, so the conquest of Alexander the Great in the 4th century BC. Okay, so when did it end? Or it should, so 300 BC to 600 AD. That's this is just Wikipedia. I'm just looking at the first two mentions. So these guys in their video are making out the Koine period is a certain specific time, because they know that there are examples of apostasy being a rapture that are used, and in ancient works talking about evaporation, and in apocryphal works talking specifically about a rapture. So I'm going to go to the rapture one. Okay, so where are we? I might just shut down some of these pages because I'm getting a bit confused with how many things I've got open. Just getting a little bit too excited here. Where are we? Here we are. Okay, so let me shut that down. Okay, so I think if you haven't heard this before, I think you're going to just be shocked at the claims of these people and the audacity of them, because they know this stuff. How do I know they know it? Because I went through their articles and I was like, okay, what is, they said, the assumption of the virgin, blah, blah, blah. And they say, that's not in the Koine period. Okay, so let's go to Kirshner. The assumption of the virgin. Maybe Rapture. I know his website is Eschatos. .com. Anyway, I can't find it just now, but if you read through his article on 2 Thessalonians 2:3, no, I've got to find it. I can't just say it and then expect you guys to do the homework. I'll just take a little bit of time and I'll find it. Okay, so let's go here. Okay. Maybe. Usually it would come up first. I don't know why it wouldn't come up. Yeah, here we go. I'm pretty sure this is his article. The falling away is not. This is by Jeffrey. Yeah, then they have this concept of falling away, like you're falling off a cliff. So we're going to look at all that as well. Not a fucking person, clearly, and it's just not coming up. Maybe eschatos. Sorry about this. Here we go. Found it. So I went through his website and just started looking up these things. And he's saying, no, that doesn't relate. And I look and go, it relates. Just like you do with James White's book. You look at the footnotes, you look at things, and you're like, hang on. No, that's saying the exact opposite of what this guy's saying. So I'm going to just keep his article open because there's quite a lot of false things that he says here. But so if we go to here, patristic Greek, the standard Greek lexicon. The standard Greek lexicon for patristic Greek is lamp, which has the primary meaning of apostasia as revolt, defection. It gives only one example of the sense of a spatial departure. Like it gives only one sense of a spatial departure. It gives a sense, you know what I mean? This one instance is found in a New Testament apocryphal work on the tradition of the Assumption of Mary. Again, this physical departure sense is outside of the Koine period. I'm trying to highlight that, but it's not really working. Outside of the Koine period, dated to the 5th century AD. So he's redefined the Koine period. Are you seeing the deception here? So some poor guy like Donnie who does research to if doing research like to the nth degree is a 10 out of 10. Donnie's sort of like on about a 4, and so he's just going through Kirshner going, why would you go to the Assumption of Mary? It's outside of the Koine period. And then him and someone like Praise I Am is probably like about it too. They're like, and just reading this article and going, why are you saying this? Okay, let me read through it. Okay. Oops. Okay. The Assumption of the Virgin. Apocryphal works are both a curse and a blessing. On one hand, we know the deception of these works wreaked havoc in the minds of many, such as the bizarre fascination with Gnostic books, the Gnostic book of Enoch, for example. On the other hand, many times the words being used reveal the usage of that particular word in history. So regardless of, say, we can look at something like Shakespeare, or we can look at someone saying something, they might be saying something perverse or disgusting back in the era of 1611, but we can still look at their word usage, regardless of how much we value their work or not value their work. Okay, so it's usually just looking at the crumbs of evidence. A police officer, they don't go to a crime scene and go, oh, well, I don't like that piece of evidence. They look at all the evidence, and so that's the thing. The Assumption of the Virgin is an apocryphal work from about 450 AD. So that falls into the Koine period, doesn't it? That we just looked at. And contains the word apostasia. In sections 31 to 32, we read, but the Holy Ghost said to the apostles and the mother of the Lord, that would be Mary, behold, the governor has sent a captain of 1,000 against you, because the Jews have made a tumult. Go out therefore from Bethlehem and fear not, for behold, I will bring you by cloud to Jerusalem. So, this is apocryphal, but it's apparently the Lord saying, I will bring you by a cloud to Jerusalem. So they're not going to go on the road. They're going to go by a cloud. This is monkey magic sort of stuff. The apostles therefore rose up straight away, went out of the house, bearing the bed of their lady, the mother of God, and went forward toward Jerusalem. And immediately, just as the Holy Ghost said, they were lifted up, by a cloud, and were found at Jerusalem in the house of their lady. So obviously, this is probably stolen from the book of Acts, with Philip being taken up and found in Gaza, and this is to do with a rapture, a harpazo. If you do a Greek study in the word harpazo, if you don't follow these kooky type of King James onlyists who say you can't look at anything apart from the English language, just do a word study in the word harpazo, and you'll find a rich resource of study. It's a very interesting thing to study. So we see that they're lifted up by cloud. So this is a rapture. So what does this have to do with what we're talking about? So here we clearly have the description of a rapture. So everyone would agree with that. It's apocryphal, but it's talking about a rapture. And it's of the apostles and the mother of the Lord. But the story continues in section 33. But when the captain came to Bethlehem, he did not find there the mother of the Lord, nor the apostles. He laid hold upon the Bethlehemites, for the captain did not know of the departure of the apostles and the mother of the Lord to Jerusalem. And that word departure is apostasia, and not the aphistomai or anything. It's exactly the same word in 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, verse 3. So here you have, probably 380 years after the writing of 2 Thessalonians, you have the word departure used. The captain didn't know of the apostasia of the apostles. So what we're seeing here, this is what I'm talking about perspective. So if we looking at a 9 or a 6, it just comes down to which perspective you're looking at. So we've all seen these cartoons. One's looking from one angle, one's looking from the other. Which angle are they looking at apostasia from in 2 Thessalonians 2:3? Well, if they think that the day of the Lord has happened already, Paul's putting himself into the shoes of those who have been left behind. And he's saying, so firstly, there has to be a falling away first. So that means that these Christians have to leave first. So when you look at it from that perspective, instead of it just means just a rapture, a harpazo. Now this is the other side of the coin. If you I've heard people use this just in common speech. Even a guy who was a Prewrath guy I was chatting to a few months ago, he was saying, I had all these friends in this town, but they all fell away. In a sense, they fell away from his friendship and from his circle. And it's exactly the terminology that we would use. And so what you see here is there's two types of usage. The usage for those going in a rapture is we're lifted up, we're caught up, we're raptured, we're harpazoed, But when you're looking at someone who's left and you're left behind, they've departed, they're gone, they've fallen away, they've been taken. they've vanished, they disappeared, all those sort of words. So it's the same coin, but you're looking at one perspective is looking at it and looking at a different perspective. Now, if you're a dispensationalist, you know specifically that at the resurrection, you can be looking at one thing, and then you sort of hit the death, burial, and resurrection of Christ. And then from then on, you're looking back. And so the world they were looking forward to Christ coming. They were pointing to Christ coming and saying, yeah, this is going to happen. This is going to happen. And so the wording is different. But then when you read Paul and you read Peter and other people, they're pointing back to, like say Isaiah, he's saying, with his stripes, with his stripes, we are healed. Okay, so he's pointing toward the Messiah being punished. Now, if you read Peter, he's saying, with whose stripes you were healed. He's pointing back to the cross. It's the same event, but you're looking at a completely different dispensation. Now, if what I'm saying is true, and this is the end of the age or the end of that dispensation, then clearly there's going to be people who look at the rapture from our perspective now, and they're seeing it different from people who are in the day of the Lord looking back. They're seeing it as an apostasia. And so we would say, okay, it's going to be a rapture. We're going to go in it. We're going to be taken up. But people who are left behind and they're looking at what happened, they're saying, oh, an apostasia happened, just like what's the usage here. So here they're saying that they're going to be taken up in a cloud, okay? And it says, then they were lifted up in a cloud and they were taken to Jerusalem. But when the captain came, he didn't know of the departure of the apostles. The apostasia, that they're gone. And so it's I think that people really need to take these type of things into consideration before they say that the Koine Greek does not say anything about a rapture or even a spatial departure. Here it clearly is talking spatial departure. Mary, the 12 disciples going to Jerusalem. Is that spatial? Is that a rapture? Yes, it's everything that they're saying. It's proven here, and they're just saying it never says that. It's sort of like it's Bill Clinton just saying, I did not have sexual relations with that woman. It's like, this is so bad. How can anyone ever trust Kirshner and the boys again when they're so sloppy in their scholarship? This is so bad. And how can you trust Donnie standing for truth, praise I am? They're just parroting this stuff. They don't even study it. They're just like blah, blah, blah. And they just repeat this. Clearly, it's a spatial departure. This is clear evidence that apostasia can refer to a rapture and a departure. The word definitions and also the morphology and syntax of the Koine is very similar to Byzantine. Some scholars would make out that it became Chinese after 300 AD to dismiss such an obvious historical link to the rapture. Some people's hatred of the Pretrib position will cause an irrational emotional response rather than a chance to learn and grow, even if one disagrees. I mean, so the thing is, this is a good argument. When's Donnie going to do a thing on this? Or is he going to do another John Hagee thing? You know what I mean? When's he going to start doing things on good argumentation against his position? He doesn't want to talk about that. He wants to debate people who are sort of like half brain dead. And this is what I find with his channel. This is why I don't want anything to do with these guys, because that they have a bias. And that's why sometimes I would be debating people with King James, and I'm like, man, this guy doesn't even know the basics about the King James issue. Why am I debating him? But I understand sometimes it can be hard to get people to want to debate. But what I'm finding is these guys, they tend to have low-hanging fruit on the other side of the debate many times on purpose. And so some people's hatred for the pre-trib position will cause an irrational response rather than a chance to learn, grow, even if one disagrees. A total of 46 manuscripts from the 8th to 6th century listed Memunai, Domitian et Assumption de Mary, It is reminiscent of the caught up in 1 Thessalonians 4:17 in the first section and a falling away departure of 2 Thessalonians 2:3 in the second. So we know, we shall be caught up together with them in the clouds to meet the Lord, and so shall we ever be with the Lord. Very similar to the first thing, they're lifted up. Then 2 Thessalonians, the departure, talking about someone who didn't go in that. They're looking at that's happened, So that's what Paul's saying to these people in 2 Thessalonians. He's saying, well, don't you know that a departure's got to happen first? You guys think you're in the day of the Lord. Okay, well, when did the departure happen? And they should have gone in it, but it's like, if you think that you've been left behind for some whatever reason, it's like that's got to happen first, just like it's mentioned here. And so it's quite amazing. So anyway, let's just go back to the video, because I do want to try and finish it. We're not even halfway. And so this might even turn into a two-part because I've already gone for 2 hours and 21 minutes.
And the second is that such an interpretation would mean that Paul is making a nonsensical and utterly useless point in this passage.
And so they try to make out that we're saying the rapture won't happen until the rapture comes. Now, Donnie has, he regurgitates this over and over and over, and it's like, it's so dumb.
Tribulationists claim that the apostasia can mean the rapture, because the word is sometimes translated in early English Bibles, like the Tyndale and Geneva Bibles, as the English word depart. They would say that if the word can mean depart in English, it might also be a reference to the rapture, where believers will depart the earth. The problem is that the word is never used that way. When the early English Bibles used the English word depart to define apostasia, they meant it to be understood in a non-spatial sense.
See, notice is they stick with this non-spatial thing, saying that in the Greek, there's never a spatial. What I just showed you was a spatial departure. It's not only a spatial departure, but it's a rapture. You're right. Then I'm going to show you some more examples in Koine of a physical departure. So they're saying it's non-spatial. It's just philosophical departure. Like, I don't believe that anymore. I don't believe in Jesus anymore. I don't follow the Bible anymore. That, like, you're apostatizing.
As in, he departed from the faith.
Notice they have to have from the faith. From sound, they can't just have he departed. That's what the verse says, he departed. Now, people put all sorts of baggage onto the Antichrist verse there, where it says the man of sin is revealed. They're like, see, even in the preface to the King James Bible, they said this will be such a blow to the man of sin. They talk about the Pope, the current Pope of their day. And so they're adding those things in, but the scripture doesn't actually say that it's the current Pope of 1611. And so we shouldn't add or subtract to the word. Now, I understand talking most probably about specifically translations, okay? Translations or the copying of the Greek manuscripts and reproduction of the words. But we should also be careful just doing this in doctrine, that we don't just add things because it sounds good or whatever. We've got to be really careful about doing that. So that's why on my website I have, I'm creating a list of things that seem to be baggage that go along with this. And so we see the great falling away. So the words the great are not there. The falling away. The word that is not there. I know it has a definite article there, but it's a falling away. The falling away from the faith. And then the great falling away from the faith. Like if you said to someone, okay, so where does it talk about the great falling away from the faith? Go, oh, well, it's 2 Thessalonians. It doesn't say that at all. It just says a falling away, a departure. Okay, so anyway, I'm just going to read through some of these comments very quickly. William Brewer, Matthew 24:29. Then shall be great tribulation, such as was not since the beginning of the world to this time, no, nor ever shall be. Compare Romans 2:9, so it's hell. Texe Marrs says, I consider these I consider these about the moment of the tribulation of minor relevance. We even can't determine the moment, let alone if the devil will or will not have some stroking blows in that period. Christ is Savior. And Daniel's 70th week to be Christ's victory of around 27 AD, not some plot of the evil ruler. Christ confirmed the covenant and made the sacrifice to cease. So I would disagree with that. I believe the 70th week of Daniel is a future event of the last 7 years. William Brewer says, I'm sorry, not same trib. I was thinking of a different passage. I was thinking of Revelation 3:10 KJV, because thou hast kept the word of my patience. I will also keep thee from the hour of trial. Tickmeister says, two shall be in the field, one shall be taken. This theoretically could mean one died. I tend to regard that it's the just that remain. Either way, relevant is, in my honest opinion, to cling to Christ, whatever the circumstances. So I would agree with that last bit, but I think it is important that the Bible's there so we can understand it, and I think we should try our hardest to figure these things out. So thanks for your comments, though, guys. Now let's just keep going through here.
Or, he departed from sound doctrine. The word is never used to describe physical departure, as in, he departed from his house.
It's never used. Like seriously, this is the biggest lie. This is, he departed from his house, he departed from the earth. Like we just saw that. It's exactly, they left the house, and they not only departed from Bethlehem, but they went all the way to Jerusalem in a cloud, and then it was called the apostasia. I mean, you couldn't ask for something better. You know what I mean? Like to refute the position. Like it's not just, because even if you had, a table was taken or something like that, it's, oh, well, see, it's not a human. They'd find all these other loopholes and say it's a non-humanoid way of looking at it. And it's like, just use common sense. You don't have to be a savant to figure it out. Just read through what I'm saying. I'll put the links there for you. But they're saying it's a non-spatial departure. They're saying it's never physical. So that's a lie. And I'm going to show you more examples. So let's just continue.
Or, as in our case, he departed from the earth.
It always means a non-physical departure, such as for...
So Kirshner is lying through his teeth. Don't trust him. He's not a good scholar. This is off the wall. If Donnie is watching this, Praise I Am is watching this, McMurtry, you guys, Anderson, you guys really need to address this. That this has been something that you guys have been saying for years and years and years, and you are wrong.
For example, a political rebellion or an apostasy from the faith.
The word...
Okay, so I'll quickly read through this. And they are informed of thee that thou teachest all the Jews who are among the Gentiles to forsake apostasia. Moses saying that they ought not to circumcise their children, neither to walk after the customs. Acts 21:21. Let no man deceive you by any means, for that day shall not come except there come a falling away, apostasia first, and that man of sin be revealed, the son of perdition. 2 Thessalonians 2:3. The Lord God of gods, the Lord God of gods, he knoweth, and Israel he shall know, if it be in rebellion, apostasia, or in transgression against the Lord, save us not this day. Okay, so but even in this section, when it's talking about rebellion, it's a rebellion is a separation. Now, if I was to type in rebellion, separation, teenage rebellion, it's rebellion. So usually people who are in rebellion, they're a separatist. Even that, they're a separatist movement. So if we just go to Wikipedia, bog standard, what is a rebellion? Rebellion is a violent uprising against one's government. A rebel is a person who engages in rebellion. So it involves you getting off your backside and doing something. He's saying it's just philosophical. It's just a mindset. Like I said, the word further, F-U-R, is philosophical. I could carry this conversation on further, but I don't want to. But if I'm walking further with you, F-A-R, that it's spatial. Okay, so he's saying that rebellion is not spatial. An insurrection is an armed rebellion. A revolt is a rebellion with the aim to replace the government, or they're fully turning the boat upside down. But apparently it's just all ESP. It's just mind power, just sitting there and not doing anything about it. But what can you name a rebellion that's just in the mind? Or is something wrong with Alan Kirshner's definitions? Okay, so he's read Joshua 2:22. Moreover, the vessels which King Ahaz did cast away apostasia. Notice he's actually got the correct thing in his video that I'm going to expose what he's saying. In his transgression, we have prepared and sanctified, and behold, they are before the altar of the Lord. So I'll read through that again in a second. So this one, 2 Chronicles 29:19, these are talking about vessels that got thrown away. They got cast away. They got taken away, carried away. And this is in the Greek Septuagint. I thought he said it's not in the Koine. Isn't the Greek Septuagint Koine? I thought Donnie said it's not in the Koine. I thought Praise I Am says it is. Just why aren't they studying these things? Thine own wickedness shall correct thee, and thy backslidings, apostasia, shall reprove thee. So backslidings would mean a turning away from faith. Yes, absolutely. But this one here is clearly a casting away of vessels. That's a spatial departure. Okay. Apostasy shall reprove thee. Know therefore that it is an evil thing and bitter that thou hast forsaken the Lord thy God, and that my fear is not in thee, saith the Lord God of hosts. Jeremiah 2:19 LXX. So it's quite amazing, because I usually listen to these YouTube things. I didn't know that they actually put this up there. They've totally destroyed their position here, because clearly, even just reading it in English, moreover, all the vessels, cups, bowls, all the things of the temple, which King Ahaz in his reign did cast away. So he caused these vessels to move, to depart, to exit, they're gone. That's a spatial departure. That means apostasy does mean a spatial departure. In their own video, them trying to debunk what I'm saying, they've actually proven themselves wrong. Amazing. Okay.
The word is used 5 other times in the Bible.
Notice 5 other times in the Bible. No, the LXX would be considered a translation of the Hebrew Old Testament, but definitely not something that is authoritative over the Hebrew or anything, or even something that we really translate from. Now, I know some modern Bibles do that, but not in every place. And so it's just whenever they feel picky about a certain word. And so, but he's making it up. It appears 5 times in the Bible. No, it appears 2 times in the New Testament. The rest of these will be translations of Hebrew words. Okay.
And each time it's used in a political or religious sense.
Okay, so let's have a look. The vessels which King Ahaz did cast away. Now, see, where they get this wrong is because whoever wrote this did their homework here and put apostasy there. A lot of people grab that apostasy, and in his transgression, they have apostasy. and they say, oh, it means like to transgress or to sin or something like that. And so, but it's actually, I've done the homework on this, and I'll show you on my website. Clearly, this is talking about the vessels, and so
times in the Bible, and each time it's used in a political or religious sense, never in a physical sense. Even if you expanded your search to include all of the secular writings in Koine Greek,
all of the secular so I mean, we're looking at apocryphal, the Assumption of Mary. We're looking at that. It's clearly a rapture. So I wouldn't say it's an orthodox thing at all, but it's like we're not even looking at secular writings. I mean, so they're specifically like Koine Greek, and then listen to them define the Koine Greek era.
you wouldn't find the word used in a spatial or physical sense.
Show me a historical reference where this word is used that way. Any writing.
Just did.
Any historical writings 200 years before the New Testament, 200 years after the New Testament.
So notice it's become 200 years before and 200 years after. No, the Koine period is like 300 to 350 years before Christ, and then it goes up to about 600. And so these guys are like, oh, it's a 400 year, because they know if they go outside of that, and they have to deal with these other issues, which I'll show you. So let's look at some of these other ones. Okay, so this is the firstly, I'll go through the casting away one, because we're onto that. The report to Hezekiah explicitly mentioned Ahaz, who removed the temple utensils from Solomon's temple, which in most pre-exilic times were considered to be used in the second temple after being used by the Persians to those who resettled Jerusalem. While the scriptures are translated in Hebrew, many times those claiming apostasia always means a non-spatial sense are rejecting the clear translation of the word, which is from the Hebrew. In this instance, the vessels were taken from the temple by Ahaz and then were later restored back to the temple. This alone shows that it's being translated by the LXX as apostasia, and it's clearly spatial. 2 Chronicles 28 says in verse 22, and at the time of his distress did he trespass yet more against the Lord. This is that King Ahaz, for he sacrificed unto the god of Damascus, which smote him. And he said, because the god of the kings of Syria helped them, therefore I will sacrifice to them, that they may help me. But they were the ruin of him and all of Israel. And Ahaz gathered together. So this is the original story. So when we're looking at the apostasia, that's the later story, okay? So he gathered together the vessels of the house of the Lord and cut in pieces the vessels of the house of God and shut up the doors of the house of the Lord. And he made him altars in every corner of Jerusalem and in every several city of Judah. He made high places to burn incense unto other gods and provoked to anger the Lord God of his fathers. Okay, so the gathered together is a calf here, which in the original story in 2 Chronicles 29:19, which King Ahaz in his reign did cast away in his transgression. It means in the AV together, gather, assemble, re-reward, sorry. And so this means firstly that apostasia here means to be cast away. And secondly, in the context, when retroactively speaking, when Ahaz transgressed, the term gathered together is used. Just this alone destroys the concept that apostasia never means a physical departure, as Kirshner claims. So here I've got the King James, and it has that he cast away, and it's talking about the vessels in his transgression. So we see that's the word apostasia in Sweet's Septuagint. And notice in Brenton's, he's translated as apostasy. So in his apostasy, we have prepared and purified. So they're translating it completely differently. So this is where they stumble, because they're not examining what it really says. So let's look at the other Bibles. The Wycliffe says defiled or defiled in his ruin. King Ahaz did cast away when he was king. Cast aside, cast aside, cast aside, cast aside, cast away. Okay. So clearly that's a spatial departure. Clearly, just looking at the 1611, moreover, all the vessels which King Ahaz in his reign did cast away. So he's casting away vessels. It's a spatial departure. And they are ignoring that. And this is sloppy scholarship. Thucydides, after the withdrawal of the Argives from the alliance, so he's saying these people left, so that would be like a rebellion. Josephus was talking about another rebellion, so apostasian. Justin Martyr, so this is translated as when the rebellious individual who dares to speak arrogantly against the supreme being will unlawfully target us Christians on the earth. And so I think some people, they read in context 2 Thessalonians 2:3 as the falling away and the man of sin as like, well, that they're linked together. So the man of sin is the worst thing that can ever happen. It's like a Nero sort of guy. And so that rebelliousness is part of the Antichrist. So it's like just a mixture of concepts there. So this is 287 to 212 BC. So this is apostasian. So sometimes it's got the movable nu, sometimes it doesn't, but you'll see that throughout most Greek. And so look, it has that the circle along with the earth is presumed to be born has such a proportion to the distance of the fixed ones as the center of the sphere to the surface. So it's talking about the distance or separation, a specific distance that there's a separation there. Cyprian, we who see that terrible things have begun, we know still more terrible things are imminent, may regard it as the greatest advantage to depart from it as quickly as possible. Do you not give God thanks? Do you not congratulate yourself that by an early departure you are taken away and delivered from the shipwrecks and disasters that are imminent? So I haven't got the actual, I've got the quotation there, but I haven't got the footnote there, so I'll leave that off for a second. Olympiorus, Philosophus, I love these Greek names. And so he was a Greek monk, said also to have been a deacon of the Church of Alexandria, is believed to have lived in the first part of the 6th century. So notice I was saying the second part of the 6th century is when the Koine period stopped. He was a peripatetic in philosophy and wrote a commentary on the Meteorologica of Aristotle. Okay, so I won't read all that because it's quite fancy, but let's just look at how this apostasias is translated. But in order not to attribute the cause of solidification to a material cause, Aristotle, namely dryness, presents the cause of separation of moisture and the attributes of solidification to this, namely to heat. So he's talking about when you like boil something, you get steam, and so it's a separation of moisture. So it's a departure. That's a spatial departure, by the way. And then we got the Assumption of the Virgin. I went through that. So I'm looking at other things, and we're going on through Reformation Bibles. Except a departing comes first, a departing. Falling away was in the bishops. So Thomas Ice says the falling away was in the King James first. It's not true. It was the bishop's Bible. And so anyway, yeah, and KJV today, a lot of people are like, oh, I love the KJV today. Even Matt First, I've heard him quote it. Okay, let's see what this says. There are two issues here, the translation of the noun and the proper translation of the article. The noun is apostasia. Although it could mean rebellion, the most literal translation is departing or falling away. It's exactly what I'm saying. Apostasy. So why are these guys following KJV today all the way through? Great material. You go to that site. They're linking it. But then here, they would just go, no. Anderson, Kirshner, Apostasia derived from the word apo, away from, and stasis means standing. It means away from standing or falling away. Rebellion is the figurative meaning, since the act of rebellion is due to falling away from authority, whether it be the truth or the government. Although it is common to interpret falling away as the end-time rebellion, the literal translation enables the reader to interpret falling away as referring to the departing of believers from the earth in the rapture. In a chapter as mysterious and ambiguous as 2 Thessalonians 2, it may not be wise to translate anything too narrowly in a way that eliminates the possibility of various valid interpretations. Here, KJV today. In regards to the article, apostasy is preceded by the definite article. The definite article would normally be translated the. However, the KJV reads a falling away. This is because the use of the article here is to substantivize the verb-like noun apostasia. Apostasia is without doubt a noun, but it has the connotation of a participle verb. It means falling away, which in English is a gerund, a verb-turned noun. Without the article, the passage would read in the sense of that day shall not come except the falling away comes first. The substantiva makes it clearer that the falling away is an event, a noun, rather than a generic act of falling away, a verb. Since there is no indefinite article in the Greek, the best way to substantivize the noun and give it greater force as a noun is to precede the verb-like noun with a definite article. Since the definite article here is neither anaphoric nor cataphoric, referring to something previous or following, nor deictic, demonstrative, pointing to something, there is no need to translate the article as the definite article in English. English has the indefinite article which serves a substantivizing function, so a falling away is a valid translation. Here. I agree 100% with what is just said there. Okay, so I think you get the point. D.A. Carson and the root fallacy is a concept mentioned by Alan Kirshner that claims aphistasis and apostasia are only etymologically related terms, but Greek apostasia always means a non-spatial sense. So that's D.A. Carson, the one who wrote the King James Only Controversy, a plea for realism. So let's go back to the video. I'm only halfway, so I think I am going to have to make this a two-part series. I thought I was going to get through this in like an hour and a half, but...
In defense of this view, some pre-tribbers will go...
Okay, so now he's going to the root fallacy, and he's going to be looking at aphistemi, which obviously I have not gone to yet. It's mentioned in the KJV article, tiny little bit, that this is a noun come verb, but we aren't using aphistemi. But I'll go a little bit more, and then I'll read some of the comments, and we'll just see how we're going.
Go so far as to committing the so-called root fallacy. What they will do is say that the root for apostasia, which is probably the Greek word aphistemi, can mean a physical departure. This method of interpretation...
Dan Wallace.
is universally rejected by Greek scholars because it's not a reliable way to determine the definition of words.
So did we do this? I mean, and even apostasia, I mean, we would all agree it means a falling away. So what, apo and stasis from standing. So if we looked at I'll just try and find a verb, or actually a grammatical chart. I might have to look at something here in a new folder. I've got so much on my desktop. It's absolutely chockers. Okay, where would that be? It might be behind here. No, it's not. New folder. There we are, new folder. Okay. All right. Yeah, that'll do. Okay, so when you're learning Greek, pros means towards, so you're going toward the box. Ano, meaning above, or upa, over, above. Ice is into, so that's where you get eisegesis or exegesis. The ek, sometimes sometimes it's a he there instead, like in certain words. But what we're concerned with here is it doesn't even have it. Here we go. That's better. Yeah, so pros means towards, apo means away from. Okay, so in the basic etymology of the word, you would say you're falling away from. So you're coming away from something that's standing. So stasis means to stand. So imagine you're standing on the box and you went away from it. You fell away from the box. You departed from that box. Okay. So it's a perfectly good translation. So
to give you an example from English, the root word for nice in Latin actually means to be ignorant, but no.
This type of example is, I mean, if you were to show this example to someone like David Crystal, they would go, yeah, that's true, but it has nothing to do with what we're talking about here. Now, I understand root fallacies, and I've read through Carson's book, but at the end of the day, this is not what we're seeing here, because clearly in Greek, like you're looking at an English word, nice, and where it comes from. See, what they should be doing is getting this word here, I guess it's a Latin word, nescius. They should put that there, and then look at the root of any word related to nescius. And like say if we were to look up, actually, this is one of the things. See, I haven't even checked this nice concept. So all you have to do is just go nice etymology. Okay, so that looks like it comes from there. Nescius means ignorant, to not know, and then it means to be nice. Okay, so let's look at foolish, ignorant, frivolous, senseless, the old French nice, careless, clumsy, weak, poor, so it just basically means to not know. So that's the etymology of the word. Okay. And that's fine. But we are looking at Nescius. So let's go to Nescius. Nescius. To not know, unknowing, ignorant, unaware. Descendants. Neki, Nikki, nice. Niche, Nishi. So it's just a different comparison, because you're looking at Greek words, looking at a Latin word, and they're going. A Greek word can have its, but this word has its root here, because this is the verb. I mean, even earlier they showed a dictionary or a lexicon with apostasia, and it had in brackets epistemi. And so most people know and understand this is the verb, and that's where these guys said it probably comes from epistemi. Okay. So then they got nice. Oh, it probably comes from this. Well, that's completely different. So, like, if it was a word like understanding, and you were like, well, the etymology means under and then standing. So it's a very similar word, because you have apostasia. So you got from standing. Now, if you had understanding, it's like like a foundation which helps you stand in a position. You have understanding, and that would be a non-spatial thing. Are nice. It's related to here. It's too simplistic. It's not really relative to what we're saying here.
No one thinks that the sentence "John is nice" has anything to do with John being ignorant. Bringing up the root of apostasia is a desperate attempt to.
It's a desperate attempt. No, it's epistemi, because the thing is, epistemi just means depart. In all of its context, it's just like to leave something, to depart from something. And so they want to separate that, because I've already shown that even if we're just using the noun, we can clearly show that it means a spatial departure and actually means a rapture. But a lot of people who are further linguistically trained than Kirshner is, they go to epistemi, and he's like, you can't go there. And it's like, well, why not? Surely there is a verb form of apostasia. I mean, if we have, you have to know a certain level of Greek to understand this. Now, what we've seen with Kirshner, he is twisting everything around to say, oh, it's not spatial and all this sort of stuff, when clearly it is spatial. So when we make, when we look at apostasy and say it comes from epistemi, they even say that that's probably where it came from. But they're just sort of saying, but don't look at that. They say, okay, the word nice, it comes from there most probably, but it's like, don't look at that. And it's like, there's nothing wrong with looking at that, as long as you know that the word nice, it probably came through the French. It's like, oh, he's a nice guy. It means that he's a bit of a dumb guy, but he's a nice guy. But then it just became, oh, you're so nice. And so it's been redefined. And so it's so much different than what's happened here.
Defend a particularly bad theory. The second reason this argument makes no sense is that if the word apostasia means the rapture, then Paul's argument to the Thessalonians is essentially that the rapture can't happen until the rapture happens.
Now, look how silly this is. It's concerning the coming of our Lord Jesus Christ and our being gathered together unto him. So it's like, okay, well, concerning the the United States wanting to separate from Great Britain and no longer have a king tax them. Now, concerning that issue, let's talk in detail. And then they say, well, they're saying the rapture won't happen until the rapture happens. No, even in this version, I'm not even sure what it is, but in all these versions, you can clearly see who say that the day of the Lord has come. Let no one deceive you, for that day will not come. So even these guys believe that the rapture triggers the day of the Lord. That's what I believe too. So clearly, it's not talking about for that day will not come unless the rapture, unless the departure happens first. It's not saying the rapture won't happen until the rapture happens. It's saying the day will not come. So I don't know why they keep saying this. I've gone through this and tried to put myself into their shoes. I've had people, this is their first argument that they make. They're like, oh, so you're saying the rapture won't happen until the rapture. Ha, ha, ha. It's a bit like someone saying, oh, I'm pan-millennial, and what are you supposed to laugh at that or cry? It's like, I just can't see why they keep bringing this up. But it just, Donnie brought this up quite a lot. I'm like, the rapture won't happen till the rapture. So I read through it again. It's like, and I read through it again. I listen to it on audio, on repeat, over and over and over. It's like, I can't see what they're saying. I think maybe Kirshner said it, and they're just repeating it, thinking it's funny. It's a bit like, the King James floated down on a cloud. I heard one guy say that once, and they just keep repeating it. Or it's good enough for Paul. KJV is good enough for Paul. It's good enough for me. Just stuff that gets. But the interesting thing is when you hear these type of things, you hear people say it. They're actually giving themselves up of where they got their information from, and so it's like from ignorant videos like this that are filled with errors.
The fatal problem with this is Paul says that these things happen before the coming of our Lord and our being gathered to him, which is the rapture. And so it is illogical to say that the rapture must occur before the rapture occurs.
What
Okay, so here's Kirshner,
what it's doing is it's making Paul say that, well, the rapture can't come before the rapture.
They don't even explain it. They just sort of show the text, highlight a few things, and so the rapture is not going to happen before the rapture. And it's like, no, it says before. It says the day of the Lord, not the rapture. And even though these guys would say it triggers it.
To their credit, this apostasia is the same thing as the rapture theory.
Notice apostasy, not apostasia. So they're getting you again there.
Is openly rejected by the vast majority of pre-trib scholars.
So I think the reason that it's actually rejected by pre-trib scholars because a lot of people haven't studied it. And I hadn't studied it. I went through, I knew of a pastor who once brought it up in the 1990s. And the leadership just sort of went, no, that's not really good. And he moved on from there. But looking back, he was correct. And he was using this book. He was using the Foundations of Pentecostal Theology book. He said that's where he got his information from. And it has a section in here about that, and it clearly talks about the rapture being the departure. And I went through it and I was like, actually, that's a pretty good. They had some pretty good material in this. And so anyway, I might just read these comments and then I might shut it down because I've gone for 3 hours. So Texe Marrs says, unless first a departure comes across to me as a strange, vague way to tell us about an event that would be in ascension very blessing for whoever participates and second chances. I'm really uncertain. No, I think it says this is a huge thing because it has to happen first. So I think unless you just skim through that text, maybe I would say as training wheels, maybe what you need to do is put the word departure, like we have falling away / departure there, or even just the word departure for a while until you get used to it. Then you can see it very clearly. My wife believes in reincarnation. To my regret, I have troubles relating to that. I think second chances are very dangerous grounds, even potentially a precursor to faith of mere good works. I mean, yeah, I'm not really sure of what you're saying there, but okay. Essence correctly spelt. So Helg says, I suspect that the concept of root fallacy is often used to get the theological opponents to fold or yield. Whenever I say it's a root fallacy, it's a root fallacy. It's a little too convenient. Yeah, and that's what I'm seeing here. These guys are like, oh, this is a root fallacy, and like clearly everything else they've talked about has been wrong. It is a spatial departure in the Septuagint. It is a spatial departure in the Koine secular period Greek that they said it wasn't. But then they limited it to 200 years before and 200 years after. It's like, why not 300? Because they know that then it includes some of these statements. So in the LXX, we saw the vessels were moved, and then we saw the whole thing of the apostles of Mary getting raptured, and they called it an apostasia. It's like, I mean, case closed. But yeah, we'll continue to go through this. So we have gone 52-minute 27-second mark through this section, and I'm enjoying going through this. The more that I go through it, the more I realize I'm correct. You know, it's one of those things. I was saying to someone the other day, I said, look, almost every time you are using discernment and judging someone's character, you're right. So sometimes you just got to own that. And usually when I go through things and I'm like, okay, say like the word Easter, you know, study it, think about it, study it, and just get to the point where it's like ridiculous amounts of study, years of study, just to have people go, it's a pagan thing, you know, and just brush it off. And even like have people come close, like Ross, and then just sort of go, no, it means, you know, Passover. I just sort of sometimes come to the conclusion where I'm like, okay, who is rivaling the amount of study that I'm doing here? And sometimes I just have to remind myself that, like, usually you're right, Nick. If you are studying something for a long period of time, you deep down you know you're right, and you're studying it and you're thinking about it, and you're trying to disprove it to yourself over and over, and you're constantly proving the opposition wrong. Usually it's because you're right, you know. And so you know, sometimes you just have to wear that and go, okay, well, I'm right here. And I will publicly say now, I will debate anyone on the planet on this issue. And I do this on 1 John 5:7, Revelation 16:5, the word Easter. This has become another one of these things where I'm like, I have so much evidence for this, and I haven't even scratched the surface with going through and checking. Like I checked the LXX. They're saying it doesn't appear in the LXX. You can just read it in English and see that it appears in the LXX. So anyway, I won't bore you guys anymore with my insane ramblings. But thanks for joining us, guys. I had fun with this one. And so we'll continue on with this same topic, and we'll go through. Maybe what I'll do is I'll look up a little bit more about aphistomai and some of the concepts that they're saying about it, and some of the rebuttals against that. So thanks for joining us, guys. God bless you, and have a great weekend.